Hi, everybody. Welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us tonight. And I am so excited about tonight's guest. This is his fourth appearance on my show, and I had just reminded Paul about that. My guest is Paul Eno, and tonight we're going to be talking about, tonight's topic is the Connecticut's Skinwalker Ranch, also referred to as New England-style Bermuda Triangle. And Paul Eno has been called the most intelligent voice in the paranormal research today. He is an award-winning New England journalist, best-selling author of 7 books. He's appeared on Coast to Coast multiple times with Art Bell and George Norrie. Paul holds a rare PhD in philosophy. He is considered one of the world's most eminent experts in the paranormal and spiritual fields. Paul is a syndicated broadcaster with his son Ben, Behind the Paranormal. It is the most intelligent and informative paranormal talk show anywhere. Paul has 2 websites. One for Behind the Paranormal is behindtheparanormal.com and newenglandghosts.com. So with that, everyone, let's welcome Paul to the show. Paul, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm so excited about tonight's topic.
Well, thank you, Noreen. It's very kind of you to say. Nice to be back with you.
So tonight's topic, you want to start on that? And you know what? Let's bring it back to the beginning, how you got involved in all of this.
Sure. I actually began to suspect that when you have a quote-unquote haunting or anything paranormal going on, that it's not in isolation. And that began, I think, really about 1998 in a case in Rhode Island. And I'm leading up to what we're talking about by just bringing up the fact that somebody next to the house where the activity was taking place said they had seen UFO'S, one of which landed on the property in which the house in question was built. And I said, that's interesting. And I began to suspect, well, gee, maybe there are other phenomena that are caught up in the process or the energy by which these phenomena occur. So that couple that with some outlandish theories I developed, and my son later on has used as our methods and theories were based on, which is sort of quantum physics, which I'll get into later on, led us to believe that there may be what we refer to as flap areas where all sorts of seemingly unrelated paranormal phenomena will occur, but they really are related because they're using the same processes to manifest. Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, poltergeist activity, things that have no classification yet that are weird but that take place. And so this is what we were led into in 2005 when a homeowner from Torrington, Connecticut got in touch with us because she read my book Footsteps in the Attic, and her opinion was that the only thing that could explain the strange things that were going on in her house, in which I am sitting right now, as a matter of fact, as a house guest of these very kind people, who turned out to be distant cousins in the course of 10 years of research. The things that were going on were just seemingly inexplicable and seemingly unrelated. So I use the example very often of the family's experience of seeing legs hanging from the ceiling, walking as if on a surface that was there in their world and not in ours. The first thing that happened when Ben and I came, Ben was 13, my son was 13 years old at the time, and now he's 24 and he's getting married next month. That's how long we've been working on this. People are astonished to see photographs from that first visit. So we came here, lovely, a 1793 farmhouse. 6 generations of the family has lived here, and it was a general store back in the 18th century. And that it's interesting because they would hear sounds of a general store and still do from time to time. And the first thing that happened to me, first of all, we came into the dining room, which is the next room from the one in which I'm sitting, and the people would, we sat there just having our initial interview. We'd never met the folks before. And you could feel people walking behind you. The place was full of people whom you couldn't see. Mm-hmm. Now, in our opinion, I long ago, I started out in the 70s. If you want to ask me a question here at any point, please.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I started out with 3 different points of view on the paranormal. I was studying for the priesthood, of all things, in the early 1970s, actually 1970 itself, when I began to become curious about this subject. I kind of worked my way in with Father John Nicola. My brother was a prominent priest in Washington, D.C., and Father John Nicola was a Jesuit priest who was in Washington, who not only was involved in the original case in which The Exorcist film was based, he was a technical advisor on that film, something he regretted till his dying day, so he told me. And he was the leading expert on exorcism of the time. They don't train you about this stuff in the seminary. However, my association with him gave me the theological background on exorcism and all this stuff about the paranormal, at least the narrow interpretation with which that they have about this in the church. Also, I was involved with Dr. Louisa Rhine, who gave me the more scientific approach to this, because Dr. Louisa Rhine and her husband, J.B. Rhine, Joseph B. Rhine, were the founders of modern parapsychology at, in this case, Duke University in North Carolina, where the Rhine Center still is a prominent place for parapsychological research. And then in addition to that, there was Ed and Lorraine Warren. I wrote something in 1972 about this first case in Connecticut, and Lorraine wrote to me and wanted to get in touch. And I lived in Connecticut, so they were not too far, so I went down and we became friends, and I worked with them till about 1978, till things just seemed to me not to be quite right. We went our separate ways. So from them I got the what today might be called the pop ghost hunting approach, and sort of a pop theological approach to this too. So I got the 3 different points of view. But by the end, really, of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s, I really didn't believe any of those approaches anymore. I didn't think any of them were good enough, and we've talked about this on your show before. The theology, it's a start, but not good enough. Too much baggage. The popular approach, forget it. It was 19th century spiritualism, and that didn't add up either. And certainly the scientific approach, you strain and sweat to get square pegs to fit round holes, to try and make science respect the phenomena and the experiences people have in it, and they're not going to do that because it's an old, outdated materialist science that's now being blown out of the water by things like quantum mechanics. So that didn't work either, in my opinion. So as a result, I was kind of open to new ideas, and one of the new ideas was this idea that you've got parallel worlds operating in the same space, based on the multiple worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And over the years, that has become, many people believe, many physicists believe that is now a fact. It's not a theory anymore. The only question is, how do you interpret it? From what I saw over all those years in the paranormal trenches, my opinion was that you've got precisely that. You've got multiple worlds interacting, and people think they're seeing ghosts because they see people in the same space who have died in their world but did not die in the parallel world. Because the key to understanding this, if we can understand it at all, is you've got all possibilities, all things that could be existing under any circumstances, any laws of physics do exist in concrete reality in one parallel world or another. So there are probably an infinite number of parallel worlds in this interpretation, and many of them have versions of you and of me.
You mean like doppelgangers?
Well, it's actually, you might think more like clones, I suppose. But you could be very different. You might have a different body. And really, when you take this to its logical or illogical conclusion, really it includes all of us and the whole biosphere, all living things, every version of everything exists. Now, were I to take the laptop on which I'm talking to you, according to some interpretations of quantum physics, and drop it on the floor, I not only have a very expensive problem, we have no show, but I've created a new universe. The one in which I did not drop the laptop on the floor continues in a different branch, like of a tree. And the one in which I did, it continues as a separate universe, which of course completely destroys the old time conundrum of can I get in a time machine and go back and shoot my own grandfather? And if I do that, how can I be born to go back in time and shoot my grandfather? Oh. Well, that's a non-starter from this point of view, because when you shoot your grandfather, you're simply starting a new universe in which he doesn't exist anymore, but the one in which you were born continues as normally. The real interesting part is that all this is simultaneous, and all these worlds may have different physics, and they may impinge on each other to make things like floating refrigerators, as in the Bridgeport house, or something coming to the top of the stairs. In this house, I'm looking at the door right now, and you have sometimes pounding on the door from something coming up apparently out of the basement. These aren't, I came to believe these are probably not spirits or demons. These are simply parallel world creatures impinging upon our particular narrow reality that we can perceive with our five senses, and we think we're seeing or hearing something supernatural, whereas it's perhaps an undiscovered part of nature. So that's our point of view. So come 2005, we encountered something we believe was like that, a place in the center, pretty much a little bit to the west of the center of Connecticut, perhaps up to the New York border, where you have all sorts of paranormal things going on. Why? Because it's a place of intersects of all sorts of different worlds. And why is that? Well, we believe that flat areas have certain the whole planet is haunted, quote unquote, as the great journalist, I think he's a great journalist, John Keel would have said. It's the late John Keel. He wrote the book The Mothman Prophecies. Yeah. And I think that what we're dealing with is precisely that. And here in central Connecticut, you had things such as were going on in this house, which were seemingly unrelated, creatures, the boxy structures kind of dancing by the window. When the first thing that happened here, I'm going back to Ben and I sitting in the dining room and feeling people all around us, I went outside by myself and walked up to the wall over the driveway, or at least what was a driveway, and I could hear a horse galloping by. I could feel the wind. The leaves on the trees were moving in this wind, but I couldn't see anything. I could hear the hoofbeats. Horses running around seemed to be a theme in this house. Many people have reported, the family at least, have reported horses literally galloping down the hallways, things of this kind. All sorts of interesting, I suppose you'd call them EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena in the common parlance, have been recorded by the homeowners.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
The horses that are running down the hall, how often does that happen? And does it happen always the same way each time?
Interesting. Well, the homeowner happens to be sitting right here. She doesn't want to come on here, but now, how often does the horse phenomenon occur, and how is it always the same? Is the question.
Well, we had the sniffing at the bedroom doors.
The sniffing at the bedroom doors. Okay.
The bedroom doors.
Yeah.
We had the clopping sound on EVP.
Clomping sound. Yeah.
Shane got that in the cellar when he was down there.
Yeah, Shane Searway, our colleague, one of the few paranormal investigators with whom Ben and I will work, because he's very credible, feet on the ground, but also a shaman, had set up some equipment here and recorded that as well.
All right, then, Paul, if that's the case, then you're familiar with residual haunting, because that's what we're told. Once something happens over and over, they call it residual. But in your case, could that be in another dimension?
Well, I think essentially yes. Now, it's ironic because I was one of the original supporters of that residual haunting theory. I was an advocate of it back in the early 70s and mid 70s. However, the more I experienced these things, the less I came to believe that. I think it's a very convenient way to explain something, but as in some areas of science, particularly in physics, they sort of invent stopgap theories and hope that they prove true at some point. The problem with the residual haunting idea, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are several problems with it. First of all, what is the sound or the apparition or whatever recorded on? Even if it is repetitive, you'd have to have fantastic amounts of iron oxide, for example, in this, even to begin to approximate a recording of audio, never mind video. And the second thing that really called it into question in my mind was the fact that I had been able to change so-called residual hauntings by interacting with them. Right? And I think it's a far better explanation, at least from the theories that I've been spouting here, are that you have an intersect with a parallel world in a certain place at a certain time, sometimes it could be centuries at a time. And that's why you keep hearing the same things. But when you interact with it, I've managed to change some of those. The sound became different, or there was actual maybe communication with whoever was over there, okay? And, very often a person who was going about his or her life in a normal way, sometimes it wasn't a person, some other creature I couldn't identify, couldn't communicate with because it was a language problem. Anything is possible, as we said, in the multiverse, if you will. Anything is possible in the world of quantum mechanics because everything exists.
All right. So then, if you were at the farmhouse and you actually saw what we call a residual haunting, that's what we know, and you saw this, say, female ghost, she did the same thing maybe once or twice a week, and you were seeing this with your own eyes, would you then try to communicate with it?
Yes.
And then,
I say that there's a caveat to that. I don't encourage that sort of thing. What I usually do is get into a meditative state, and I discovered this in the late 1970s, and wait for any sort of connection that might occur. I don't try for it. I think that can be dangerous. And I never do this if I suspect the thing is something other than what it appears to be, and it almost never is what it appears to be. I don't know if I've ever given this example on your show, Noreen, but if I could have a bit of an aside to say what I'm talking about here. As a seminary student and as a student in psychology in graduate school, I worked in several psychiatric hospitals, or state hospitals, I should say, but primarily with the psychiatric patients. And in the case of my seminary studies, it was very unusual because they don't teach this in the seminary, but my second seminary faculty was rather sympathetic to my studies in this field, and I was really grateful for that. The third seminary faculty threw me out because they didn't like what I was doing about a year or two before ordination, and I never became a priest. But in the second faculty, I was working at the Ogdensburg State Hospital in New York State with the exorcist for the diocese. Okay, can't tell you who that is, and he's still alive. But one of my jobs was to, first of all, learn the difference between who's crazy and who's having a paranormal experience. But what I learned was that there are sometimes entanglements between psychiatric conditions and paranormal experiences. And one of the reasons we'd be called in very, very hush-hush was if someone was, in their bed, having an episode was one thing. But if stuff was falling off the shelves across the room and things were flying around, obviously this is not the patient causing this in any normal way. And there was a suspicion perhaps there was demonic activity going on, as I thought it was at the time. So there was that. There was one occasion where there was a ward that the staff didn't like to be there alone at night, and it was considered pretty odd, and nobody really liked to be in there. Now, there were patients there. They were not psychiatric patients. This was a state hospital, and anyone who was unable to pay would, even at the time in the 70s, would be able to come into the hospital and be treated there. Well, there was a woman in the hospital who said she was a psychic medium, because I was visiting with the patient in a pastoral capacity. And I said, okay, well, what makes you think, that this, that, and the other thing, and we talked about it. And she said, well, there's someone in this hallway. This hallway is haunted because it's a man waiting for his wife, presumably to pass on one of the patients, and he's waiting for her, and he's going to take her home, presumably to heaven or whatever. So I said, okay. So the chapel also happened to be in that hallway. So I went into the chapel, and the staff said, well, it's a seminary student. I guess he's praying or something, right? So I spent a number of hours each day, over 3 days, in that chapel, in this meditative state. And I did come in contact with a man who was waiting for his wife, and he was going to take her home. However, he was waiting in a railroad station across the river in Prescott, Ontario. in a close parallel reality, as I judged it, and he was, in which it was not considered odd to talk with your neighbors from other parallel realities. A very strange concept. Everything else in that world seemed to be similar to ours. You had United States on one side, Canada on the other, and he was waiting for his wife to come in on the train from Montreal, Canadian National Railways, just as we have here. If I got it right, he spoke English, obviously, and he was going to take her home. That was it. And this psychic medium was picking this up and interpreted it in the way that our normal paradigm would allow her to interpret it, our narrow paradigm. That this must be a ghost. What else could it be? The spirit of a departed human being. The love is there, and he's waiting for his wife, who's also going to be departed. They're going to, skip off to some spiritual paradise. And this is, what else could it be? I think our own narrow-mindedness prevents us from seeing a stunning, incredible reality that we narrow down to a two-dimensional 19th century construct that's essentially spiritualist. So, in doing, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I misinterpreted this, but it was quite clear. And this sort of thing has happened on a number of occasions. And where I really got suspicious about the residual haunting thing is that very often I'd encounter these things, and they thought that I or we were ghosts haunting them. Because they're going about their normal lives, and they would see us as we would see them. Wispy spirit-type things, hear voices in a very muffled way, sometimes, hear our laughter, whatever, and they were sometimes terrified. That happened to me in this very house.
So, Paul, okay, so with this theory about life after death, when we die, we go into another parallel dimension, and okay, so then ghosts are still living their lives on the other side. Spirit.
Well,
when we die.
The other side of what, Noreen? There are billions and billions of other sides, if this theory is correct. And I think that what the people, because this is the ultimate question, of course, and you just asked it. I think the term afterlife is, in a way, meaningless, because in a multiverse, with almost probably infinite numbers of worlds in which many of which we live, how can there be such a thing as death? Now, obviously, we see bodily death. We go to funerals and things. But there's been some interesting research that we've done, we being Ben and myself, people we've spoken with at length who believe that they have been about to die, and all of a sudden they're continuing. Or in several cases, they're continuing in different lives. Ben himself had an experience where he was driving he had this funny little yellow car with a black convertible top. Our neighbors used to call it the Bumblebee, little tiny thing. And he'd go zipping up to see his, to Worcester, Massachusetts, from where we live in Rhode Island, to see the one who's going to become his wife next month. And he said he was skidding, hydroplaning, on the road, it's a rainy day, and he was about to go over a ditch, and he never would have survived it. And all of a sudden, he was driving normally, And it's funny, because when he came back home, he said several things were different, because the difference between one parallel world and another may be that in one, your car keys are on a different table. That could be the only difference between the two universes. This is what's theorized. So, but every time people have told us that this has happened to them, things have been a little bit different. Sometimes remarkably so. One man said he woke up the next morning. This is also in Ontario. I don't know what's going on in Ontario the past 40 years or so. But he said there was a house across his back garden that had never been there before. It had been a vacant lot. And now, sure, these people run into our show by the hundreds. Now, they can't all be bonkers, Or maybe they can. Maybe we're crazy too. I don't know. But this stuff is well attested in our experience anyway. So I think we're looking at something entirely different. So again, this gets us back to our original discussion about these flap areas, particularly this one in the west central Connecticut.
Paul, did you explain to the viewers what the paranormal flaps are?
Well, I mentioned, yes, that these are areas of intense paranormal activity that seemingly unrelated. And traditionally, people who investigate ghosts don't think about Bigfoot or UFOs. But I think now more and more people I don't know if we flatter ourselves to think we're responsible for this, but more and more people, particularly in the UFO community, are coming to us noticing that people who have UFO experiences very often have poltergeist experiences too. Stuff's moving around in their houses. They sometimes see apparitions. We just got a report yesterday from this area here in Connecticut that people, a particular person who was a healthcare professional, was reporting to someone who is a confidant of mine, and who got into a conversation with this person in a professional capacity of what she's referring to as the gnome people. And this area is fraught with that sort of thing. There have been things recorded on film, and I did not send you this because it's in confidence still, that you've got all sorts of really strange. What's that going on behind us here? Okay, strange lights. Perfectly normal. But anyway, they're a really, really strange kind of creature that I can't identify. A photograph was taken and standing over somebody's kitchen sink by a security camera, and I can't say any more about that, but that's typical of these flap areas, particularly this one. So I think, again, what we're dealing with is the intersection of a number of parallel worlds here. There are other far more ominous occurrences here. There was the present, and we find these in these flap areas too. Just before I get into the more ominous areas, there are certain physical characteristics of the land. Sometimes you tend to have hills, you tend to have high water tables, you tend to have clay or sandy soils very often. You tend to have rivers and streams that will intersect. And why would this be the case? Well, it's the same reason why we find in so many quote-unquote haunted houses that phenomena occur around electronic equipment and around plumbing and electrical wires. Because what does water do? If it's not distilled water, it will conduct electromagnetic fields. And what do? They form, in one of their missions, I suppose, they form, we think, the boundaries between these parallel worlds. Why is it that the quote-unquote ghosts see us as we see them, as wispy or kind of this sort of thing? Because these electromagnetic boundaries are essentially plasma, electrified air molecules. There are photographs of this from this very house, some of which I sent you before the show. And so you would naturally see through these things. You're not going to see a person as he, she, or it really appears. You're going to see a gauzy figure or something like this, as I saw in that Bridgeport house during that attack by the parasitical entities, or quote-unquote demons, on the Monday night of the case in 1974. So I think this all kind of holds together, at least in my opinion, and this is, I think, what we're dealing with. Now, the more ominous... Do you have any questions? I don't want to keep rambling on here.
No. Now, the
Okay.
house, this haunted house that you're in, that house is surrounded, on 3 sides of water?
No. It's on a little hill. It's surrounded by open land, but there is a stream below it. And again, we looked beyond this house, and this is how we found all this stuff in this flap. I mean, you don't have to look very hard sometimes, because people up and down this road, not all of them that we know about, are reporting strange phenomena. I know that there's one man who will not be in his house alone. Another one is for sale, which is not unusual in these parts these days. And the whole town kind of, we put out the word on this, and we've been constantly getting reports, and we've been attempting to set up now we've been on this case for 10 years. We're having trouble setting up a town meeting. We go to various facilities, and we have even the local library would not let us meet there. I've never encountered that before. The local American Legion, now I'm a veteran, I'm a member of the American Legion, and they still gave me static about, they want all kinds of crazy money to rent the hall. And I don't understand it. Perhaps, excuse me, one of the explanations may be one of the more ominous factors I wanted to mention, and that's in 2009, the military started showing up here. We've gotten all sorts of witnesses who were walking, say, their dog to the end of their property, and were asked by what appeared to be armed troops, many of them in black, however, to turn around and go back, politely but firmly, and they couldn't come that way. Mark D'Antonio, who was a genuine scientist who is working with us on this case. He's the Mutual UFO Network's National Director of Audio and Video Analysis. You can look him up. He's an astronomer. Said that one of his friends was fishing at a place he'd fished since he was a kid, and some armed troops apparently came along and told him to leave. This was going on throughout the area. It seemed to be centered on a farm, of which I sent you photographs, and there were. This is very, very well attested. And 2010, I guess this went on until about 2010, middle of 2010, and then it kind of faded away. And the question is, maybe, and I checked with the National Guard and all sorts of people who might have, and nobody knew anything about it. Now, this farm is very interesting. Now, I have a couple of connections in the intelligence community, and of course they can't give you classified information, but they can give you hints. And one of them said, we gave him the address of this particular farm, and he said to back off. All right, wouldn't tell me anything more about it, but obviously something is going on there. This is a farm, and you can see from the photos there were broken down buildings. They were replaced in 2013 by a huge, thousands of square feet metal sheet. And as I mentioned, I'm a professional I'm still a working journalist, and I write about other things besides the paranormal, of course. One of them is construction and development issues on the East Coast. And I've been doing that for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like that metal sheet. I don't know what before or whatever, but there was evidence that there had been excavation going on underneath it. And you can see the dark areas around that metal sheet in that photograph, the aerial photograph.
Yeah, I'm showing that.
And there was, obviously, before that had been graded, there was no excavation. So something is going on. A brand new, beautiful barn has been built that looks kind of like an English dairy barn, but there's no farming that anybody's been able to see. And this brings up the question of how do you study a case of this scope in an area of at least several square miles, probably an area embracing half of a state? Well, you have a spy network. Now, our show has a bunch of reporters, and I deliberately, over the last 10 years, have set up a spy network. And now, not even the homeowner here knows all the people who were involved in our spy network here. We keep an eye on the farm, look for witnesses, phenomena are reported. These are people, usually I come here quite often, and I meet with people before we give them any information or responsibilities in this regard. And so, I mean, it's as secure as we can possibly make it. And nobody has seen any farming on this location. One of the spies, quote unquote, is someone who works in the area, and she was driving up past this farm and saw the gate open. Nobody had ever seen the gate open. And she was going to just go running up the driveway to ask direct. I said, don't. Fortunately, she got on the phone to me at the time. Said, don't do that. You don't know what can happen. There were two, according to her, official-looking vehicles in there. But again, nobody's seen any farming. Now, again, maybe we're just wrong about this, but there's a lot of excavation, evidence of a possible underground ventilation going on. And the question is, why would the military... Maybe they have an underground base, if you want to use the classic term, and maybe they don't. But why would they be interested in an area like this within 100 miles of New York City? Well, I think to study this, they have to go where the intersects are. They have to, and in order to study it. And why do they want to study it? Well, wouldn't we love to weaponize the paranormal? That's my theory, anyway. We came up here in 2010 with a film crew, a very well-known director, whom if I mentioned, I'd probably get in trouble. But we were filming in the house here, and then out in various locations. The homeowner very kindly brought us, of course, up to that farm, and then there were 3 points of this triangle, if you will, that may be arbitrary, but Ben and I kind of pinned them down. There's this farmhouse, and then a few miles away, there is the farm itself that I've been talking about, point 2. And then we went up to point 3. We kind of triangulated it in a sort of military way. And Ben kind of found it. Now, Ben has a lot of gifts in this field, and I trust him. And we came to a place that was on a road. It was right across from a dirt road. And we went down... Ben said down here, so we went down a hill into the woods. You remember the day we did that, right? And we had the film crew with us, and the homeowner was with us. And there was a very strange brook down there. that sort of came and then split into two and then joined again. There was like a little island with stones on it. And Ben had one of his shamanic experiences. He doesn't like me to talk about this, but he collapsed. And this happened at Rendlesham Forest, too, in England, the famous UFO site. Mm-hmm. And it happens now and then. And this is all on camera. And I really don't want to tell you more about it at this point. But he said they're looking in the wrong place. And, of course, across the road with this so-called abandoned camp, there were vehicles coming and going, and this is in November. There was no summer camp activity at the time. And he said they're looking in the wrong place for point 3. And so I think, because I've been saying that on the air, maybe they found the right place since then, but not that I can see. So in any case, I think we're looking at research going on, and there are flap areas really all over the world. And if you look at them, like the Rendlesham Forest case, December 1980, all these Air Force people witnessed these landings of UFOs and all sorts of sightings. But again, we looked at it beyond that, talked to other people, talked to some of the local people. Nobody seems to do that. And the place has a whole history all the way back to Saxon times of bizarre phenomena going on. There are people who have had similar experiences to what the Air Force had that night over those several nights in December 1980, and all sorts of other things happening. It's a flap area, and of course the military had bases not in one place, but on two sides of the darn forest, right? And they were dated back to World War II. Naturally, they were launching sites. This is in eastern Suffolk, England, the closest to the continent. They were launching bombing missions over Germany and France. However, the bases stayed in action, of course, in the Cold War days, but you wondered what else was going on there. There's information that there was other research going on that may have been related to the paranormal flap area. So in the Bridgewater Triangle of Massachusetts, which we live about 20 miles from in Rhode Island, they don't seem to have any military activity yet that we found. But Ben and I were there, and we, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this management area, we passed a line of what appeared to be unmarked utility trucks with guys in sunglasses kind of watching us ominously pass by. So maybe there is some activity there of that kind. So this goes on and on and on. And this Litchfield case really was probably the first major one that we have encountered. And perhaps I should explain, too, if you don't have any questions right now, about our term Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, go ahead.
We call it Connecticut Skinwalker Ranch. Well, there's a place in Utah that is sort of the mother of all paranormal flaps, according to the witnesses. Supposedly, and there was a book called The Hunt for the Skinwalker, which is really quite good, very well written, which says that a number of scientists have been researching this area. You have things such as happen here, only more dramatically, I think. Holes opening in the air and strange creatures stepping through, holes opening in the sky, UFOs coming through, very strange disappearances, appearances, seemingly shifts in space and time. There was one situation where there was a herd of cows that disappeared, and they were all of a sudden inside a large trailer, and nobody put them there. Things of this kind, such as we've been talking about, that may happen in flap areas with the intersecting of parallel worlds and the blending and the mixing of the energies and even the inhabitants thereof and all this business. So that being the sort of the quintessential flap area, we decided to call this sort of Connecticut Skinwalker Ranch. And that was a bit of a tweak for them too, because nobody's ever let us near that case. We've been tried to be in touch with some of the group that's supposedly investigating it and everything else. So maybe the whole thing's a hoax. I mean, I doubt it. I've heard plenty of independent corroboration. But that's why we call this Connecticut Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow. Now, I understand that those black helicopters fly around in that area as well?
Yes, there seemed to be a lot of strange air traffic here. Now, we were out in the yard earlier this evening. We were looking. You can see the regular passenger traffic pattern from Bradley International Airport between Springfield and Hartford from here. The planes that head west, head over this area. But there have been plenty of other odd air traffic, some of which Ben and I have seen. There have been a lot of unmarked helicopters. There have been C-130s, military-type aircraft, traveling from south to north, which is very unusual here. There have been a number of other things, too, seen in the air. There was a UFO flap, if you want to say, as part of the main flap several years ago, and people in the town of Goshen would get out of their cars and look at the strange lights in the sky. Ben and I saw some of those ourselves. And again, we believe it's all part of the intersecting of parallel worlds. Now, if Bigfoot or somebody comes through, or if you have something that seems like a ghost, or parallel world denizens are coming through, and in the house here, I've been seeing a number of small figures, and a gray figure, and you name it, it's pretty much been seen here. They may or may not know where they are, or they may or may not be aware of us, but certainly throughout the area there have been reports of these things, and the UFOs, or whatever they may be, or intelligent beings, whatever species they may be, may use these as, if you want to say, doors to interact with us, study us, feed from us, as parasites do. And I think that's really what the paranormal is. It's not paranormal at all. It's quite normal. Mm-hmm. It's just in areas like this, it's very dramatic, and people notice it.
So let's talk about this haunted farmhouse. They're involved in all of this with the hauntings and the UFOs and the aliens as well. Has anybody in that house ever had an alien abduction?
No, not that as far as I know, no one in this house has had an alien abduction experience.
And even though with all that activity, I'm surprised.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things we noticed here is that, and you bring up an interesting point there, Noreen. Ben and I noticed how positive the energy is in here. Now, I think if Charles Manson or somebody would move into this house, forget about it. If you have negative people, you're ringing the dinner bell for the parasitical entities to come in, and this is what I think the quote-unquote demons really are. They fill the bill of what folklore calls demons, But I think that their agenda is maybe a little different. But they're like any other living creature. They just want to eat. All right, and what do they eat? They energy that seems to be produced by us, and we've seen them operating in several different worlds at the same time, almost like kind of an octopus with different arms. I'm not saying that's what they really look like, although I have had physical encounters with them. And I think that we're the people in this house, negative people. It would be a much more serious situation. But I think now certainly the lady who's sitting here with me now has lived here for, it's got to be, 64 years now? 66 years. Time flies when you're having fun, right? And has experienced this since childhood. And she wrote a diary of experiences, which was turned into a book, as you know. And so I think that it's considered normal here. But again, it's a happy house. The people are just wonderful and positive, and I think that's what keeps the negativity aside. That's what Ben and I call the Peter Pan theory. Think happy thoughts. Sounds hokey, but it's absolutely true. That's our first advice to people who are going through negative experiences. Get it together, pull yourselves together, stand shoulder to shoulder, and be positive. And it really works.
Now
So that's why they haven't had that kind of problem here. And I think the alien abduction thing, not to interrupt, but the alien abduction thing, and it's funny, I was just contacted, of course, by Kathleen Marden, who was the Mutual UFO Network's head of investigations of alien abductions. She, of course, being the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, the first abductees of the 1960s who got the real press. And she is we're going to do a show with her about cases that they're running into now where the people think they're being abducted, and maybe they are, but it all seems very demonic. They start having these things, and we've kind of been consulting on that now for several years, and we're going to do a show on that in a few weeks. So I think that also, maybe the abduction experience may be a ruse, or at least some of it, by parasites, and that's why they can't get in here either, because of the positive spirit here.
All right, I want to ask you a question, because I ask this to everybody that comes on almost. Are aliens demonic entities?
Well, I think that the terms we put on things may be arbitrary. And as I've often used the illustration, if I'm sitting in this room and a wispy thing goes by and tweaks me in the nose, aha, a ghost.
Yeah.
But if I'm out in the yard here and you see the same wispy figure with a big ball of light over it as, aha, an alien, maybe, or at least a UFO experience. I think the terms, the labels we place on these things may have a lot to do with with the context in which we experience them, and not only with our own narrow understanding of what they may be. Why is it that so often Bigfoot is associated with UFO sightings, same area? I think that's because this is the classic flat kind of a scenario. But there have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings in the areas of UFO activity as well. So I think that your aliens may be quote unquote demonic entities. Parasites push buttons, but I think that it's perfectly possible they could be what they may appear to be, which is visitors in nuts and bolts craft from another planet, or another parallel world. But as Kathleen Martin told us, that is becoming less and less common, and what's becoming more common are experiences with these negative entities. Now, which are, if I may, I keep thinking more things, which are alien entities. I told you when we were in that house in Bridgeport, 1974, those 4 entities I encountered were alien. I don't mean from Mars or something, but just not us and not from here. They were alien. They felt it. When I had the physical encounter with it, it was not a human or any other kind of body that I've ever known. This is essentially, I think, the term alien has to be broadened somewhat.
Mm-hmm. So now this farm has been in the family for generations, correct?
Well, it's not since it was built in 1793, but 6 generations have lived here. Okay. And it's, as a matter of fact, some of them I think are still living here from our first experience that day. And there was some evidence that in the basement, the great-grandparents were somewhat afraid because they thought that the current residents were ghosts haunting them. That sort of thing. It's the sort of thing we run into all the time, if our interpretation is correct.
So the homeowner what does she see in the house? Has she seen aliens? Does she see ghosts? What does she see?
Well, there have been apparitions of what I suppose you might call ghosts, small figures, excuse me. Also, very tall figures. There's protection here as well, I should add. There are a number of species, for lack of a better term, Ben and I have encountered in paranormal work, who we believe are from parallel realities. One of them is a very, very tall species, very almost monk-like sometimes. And I remember that she was describing one in the bathroom upstairs, sort of kind of so tall it could almost, not fit under the ceiling. That was an apparition that has occurred. Also, there have been lots of orbs, of course, whatever they may be. And there have been sightings of I believe, a gray figure looking down over the railing of the upstairs, and this sort of thing. And then the legs. And things, but this is kind of like daily, sort of not pretty much routine around here for the last at least 66 years. Now, when Shane Searway, our friend, and someone else was here, I guess, too, there was a sighting of a figure just sort of walking by a doorway, this kind of thing. And again, this is daily life here in the house at sort of the center, at least our center of the paranormal flat here in Western Connecticut. So pretty much everything has been seen and experienced here, but nothing really negative. Although there have been recordings, if you want to say EVPs, of some low growling sounds and excuse me, and me coughing and things like that. And I think, well, again, anything and everything is out there in the multiverse, and in a place like this where you have multiple intersects, there can be strange species. Now, I wouldn't even know how to classify those boxy things jumping by the window, and I believe they've been seen in the house as well, once or twice, yeah? Yeah, out in the hall. And I bet this is daily life in the multiverse when you have these intersects. Anything is out, everything is out there, and anything can come in. And I think, again, the way is blocked to really negative entities by the positive nature of this family. There can be neutral entities who may not even know you're there, but I think everything is out there and it can come through, depending on you.
So if she's seen aliens, now, what are they wearing? Can she describe what an alien wears?
Well, I mean, again, when you say alien, I mean, I don't think she's necessarily saying these are people from other planets. Other worlds are not necessarily other planets. They could be other versions of our world. This is one of the hardest things to understand. And the really hard thing to understand is that it's all simultaneous. Okay, this is good physics, the physics of time. And Einstein started this with the theory of his theories of relativity. Everything seems to be simultaneous. Time, as we experience from past to future, really doesn't have any objective existence. It's a function of our own consciousness. So that, the happiest moments of your life are still, and the worst moments too, are still being lived. And this has very interesting implications for the nature of our memories, the nature of our imaginations, the nature of our creativity. And that has really not been pinned down fully as far as the location in the brain is concerned, because we have a materialistic science and reality is not materialistic. So that's another issue for another show. So, but to get back to your question, whatever these creatures are, have you, and I'm asking our friend, have you noticed that they're wearing any particular kinds of clothing?
All different kinds of clothing.
All different kinds of clothing, yeah.
The monk robes.
The monk robes, yeah. Those are friends of ours.
We had human clothing.
Human clothing.
Polka dot dresses.
Polka dot dresses.
Top hats and tails.
Top hats and tails.
We've had pant legs.
Pant legs.
Contemporary clothing.
Contemporary clothing. All right. And what about the really alien creatures?
They weren't wearing it. They were just like shapes.
Just shapes. You couldn't really. Okay.
Yeah. Through bird shaped.
Yeah.
Birds like.
Which in my case, you got kind of a thick membrane there. And that physicists actually call it. They call them branes. BRANES. These boundaries. And the thicker the one, I think visually, that's what you might see. That's my opinion, anyway. So the human denizens, of which there have been. I remember we had the mirror incident, didn't we? There was. I think I sent you that.
Yeah,
picture.
you did. Let me show that. Here, let me.
Okay. I learned photography at the taxpayer's expense in the U.S. military, and I've been a professional journalist, photojournalist for 35 years, and so I know a little bit about photography. I jumped through we jumped through every hoop that night to make sure that was not a reflection. We used non-flash, flash, and excuse me, that mirror, lovely mirror actually. This kept coming out, and almost like people have seen a woman coming through, almost like that portal, if you want to use a classic term. And members of the family identified it as Grandma. Yeah, the grandma. Yeah, and now whatever that means, I don't know, but I still don't believe it's the spirit of the grandmother, because there are philosophical issues involved there. Can you truly be you if you don't have a body? And you have to have a complete dualist, going back to the ancient Greeks, attitude that you can, if you believe that. There are a lot of things, you have to believe in a number of strange things in order, things that I don't think are philosophically viable anymore, to believe in the classic ghost as the remnant of somebody that still has their memory and all this business. So again, I think it was Grandma in some parallel reality where she never died. Because right next to you can be 1910 or 1810 or 28 or the year 2810. It's all right there next to us. And you can make an argument that when people see UFOs, some of them at least may be from the future. That was one of the theories in the Rendlesham case. And and our good friend Jim Peniston, one of the Air Force security people, swears to this day that these were time travelers. Because he actually touched the craft, one of the craft, when it was on the forest floor, and he felt a download, as he calls it, of binary figures, which are there were certain locations on the map and everything else. That's for another show, I guess. But that was all. But he said they under hypnosis later on, if you trust hypnosis, he said they were not alien, they were us. But he believes they were from the future. So this could be anything. So what we're seeing in this house could be from the past, to us. What to us is the past, other versions of the present, and the future, and all of which in whatever versions you want to see. There's no limit to what could be, and that's a literal statement.
Isn't there a grandson that had an invisible, or hasn't had an invisible friend?
Yes, yes. Well, he's a little older now, but at the time we started this case, or at least in 2010, he was 4. 3. In 2010, he was 3?
Yeah, he was born 2007.
Okay, born in 07. And, okay, well, they must have been 3 at the time. He said that he had always been talking about his invisible friend, Ashwar. Okay, interesting. Which we always thought, just assumed it was spelled Ashwar. Okay. But be that as it may, we were up here with that film group that night. And Ben and I were sleeping over in the living room, and it was very, very cold, I remember. And we went outside, and I had my trusty little infrared camera, and he said the invisible friend was out in the tree in front of the house. So I just pointed it up in the tree, and we got this amazing video. It's if you look at it about 6 seconds in, I know you have it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna play it for them now.
Yeah, okay. And about 6 seconds in, if you look to the upper left part of the thing, the frame, there's a thing that kind of comes down, looks almost like a whitish tadpole coming down out of the tree, and that has created quite a sensation. But whatever it may be, and we found other people, notably a man in Florida who got similar kinds of creatures in security footage of his backyard, but from the 1970s. So was this Ashwar? Is this what some of these things actually look like? I don't know. The interesting thing is that the Ashwar's people lived in trees, and we later found out, and this Shane Searway found this out, that there was a Native American word, albeit from South America, Achhuar, Ashwar, which essentially refers to trees and spirits that live in trees.
All right, well, let me play that video for them.
Yeah.
They won't hear you talking. They're just going to hear the video. Okay.
Okay. Playing the video.
I'll play it one more time for them. Okay, so I just played it for them.
Okay. So wouldn't you know, I pulled the camera away, but you can still see the thing clearly for several seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what it is, again, I don't know. I would say it has an alien feel to it, to me. Again, in using that term in the very, very broad sense.
Has the homeowner ever tried to communicate with any of the spirits that were in the house?
Well, whether they're spirits is another question.
Or whatever they are.
Yeah, well, entities. Have you ever tried to communicate?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Oh, no.
I haven't, although the only experience we had, Ben and I were in the basement. What we were attempting to do, and this a few years ago, was move some of the, if you want to call them portals, and move some of the intersects out of the house so they'd have a little peace and quiet for a change. And I guess it worked for a little while. We were down in the basement, and we believe we were working with one of these, the tall monk-like figures. Ben refers to them as the clerics. And we've encountered them on several occasions, very benign species that seems to also be aware of the neighbors, as it will, in this case us, and have a willingness to assist. And you wonder if some of these, just like these parasites are responsible for, I suppose, our beliefs about demons. Perhaps some of these other species that are aware and helpful, positive, are aware of are part of our tapestry of our beliefs about angels. I don't know. So we believe we were working with one of them. I could feel its hand as I held it, and we attempted to move. This sounds really goofy, but this happened to us. You saw the whole thing. And speaking to our friend here, and for a while it seemed to work. But again, these intersects are prone to move. As I said, they may be in the same place for centuries, but all of a sudden they're gone. You can find that in some of the stone circles in the old world. I stood in the Score Hill Stone Circle in England, in Devon, England, one time in 1989, lousy March day. And I stood in there. I could not take an in-focus photograph, still using film in those days. I felt very lightheaded. and I saw across the moor, the wilderness area there, a line of people come up from behind a tor, as because that pile of stones on these moors, as they call them in England. Several on horseback, several on foot, maybe a quarter of a mile away, and they looked a heck of a lot like Elizabethan type people. Now, whether they were, I don't know, but who would be out doing recreational horseback riding and never mind walking in a rotten March misty day? I don't know in England. So, but the other circles are dead. Maybe they were put there because of the energies coming up out of the ground. And that's the belief of the Dragon Project. Our friend Paul Dever has been working on that for many, many years. And there is actually a spiral band of energy that comes up out of the ground in many of these areas where these stone circles are. Others are dead because the parallel world intersect, as we would call it, has moved. And so maybe that's what happened in the case. So they moved back into the house after we tried to move the intersects up. Some of them, anyway.
And Paul, have you? Okay, now so these parallel universe, the dimensions, or whatever. Can a human? Okay, so I know. Okay, so we did a show one time, and I don't understand this quite. Disappearances, and one of the cases was this guy was on his farm. This was in the 1800s. He was on his farm, and he was walking across his farm, and he was waving to his neighbors across the way, and all of a sudden, poof, he disappears.
Oh, that was in Tennessee. That's the David Lang case. But
yeah.
But that was not. That never happened.
It didn't?
Yeah, it was someone in my own profession, a journalist who made it up. That's pretty well documented. However, there have been cases like that. As far as these disappearances are concerned, I actually spoke to two witnesses of another one in England. They were jogging down a road, and the person who was leading tripped all of a sudden on something they couldn't see and fell and disappeared. Was never seen again. Other people have encountered disappearing not only people but appearing and disappearing buildings, villages. This happened in Vermont in 1975. I was up there just fresh off the Bridgeport poltergeist case, and I was visiting some friends near Enosburg Falls, Vermont, which is named after a relative of mine who was in the Revolutionary War. And they said, and a truck drove up, and it was two surveyors from the town who had a little bit farther south in Vermont than that. And they told me the story of having been, very no-nonsense. If you know any Vermonters, I mean, the old-time Vermonters, they were feet on the ground. They didn't make stuff up. And they had been in the town of Johnson, down a little bit farther south, and they had been walking the bounds, as they call it, for a surveying project for a landowner. Excuse me. And they were using the U.S. Geodetic Survey map, which generally has the main buildings on it. But there was a farmhouse that was not on the map, bottom of a hill, following a stone wall, and they said it looked kind of dilapidated, like it had never been painted. There was some laundry hanging on a clothesline, but there were no cars, there was no electrical power apparently to the house, no wires, and they kind of walked across this little dirt road toward it, and there was a man who came around the house with carrying an axe, big beard. And didn't seem to see them. And they said later on, it felt as if he looked toward them but couldn't quite see them, because they were calling out to him because they wanted to find out where his property lines were. And then they figured, well, retreat was the better part of valor, because they said there's still, what they said exactly was there's still a lot of strange people in these hills. So the guy had an axe and stuff, so they figured they'd retreat. So a few days later, they're doing the actual survey work, and the house was gone. And I said, what the hey is it? And there was just an old foundation. And so the guy went to the town hall, and one of them, and he said, sure enough, there was a house that had been there, but it had burned down in 1910. So unless you're prepared to admit that there are, quote, spirits of houses and axes and funny guys with beards and all this, you really have to kind of look at the possibilities of the multiverse here and the parallel worlds, because so many of the experiences I've had in the paranormal are so physical. I mean, why are they wearing, at least in some cases when you see it, why are they wearing clothes? Why are the quote-unquote spirits seen in this house sometimes wearing polka-dot dresses or something, Are there ghosts of dresses? And now some people might say, yes, I mean, some of the spiritualists have a belief in the astral world and the spirit world, quote-unquote, is, they're corresponding objects there as there are here. And that gets back to the Greek philosopher Plato. I just think that there's so much more to it than that, because these things are so physical. They're not astral at all in a lot of my experiences. So I think that, we're dealing with a lot bigger situation than these spirits. Another example, this was after stop me if I've told you this. Another example was I had spoken in Providence, Rhode Island, and a woman came up to very, very lovely, nicely dressed, business type. She was a retired banker. Retired real estate agent. And she said that she and her husband had an interest in ghost towns. And they got more than they bargained for when they went out to Utah. And there was an old ghost town known as Woodard, and they wanted to see it. But they were assured there really weren't any buildings left, and there might be a few artifacts, but so they were just going to look around. So they drove out to Woodard, and the first thing they come to is a sign in a foreign language saying "Willkommen," like welcome only spelled wrong, right? They got into this town, and it was a functioning town. They said it was really weird because all the cars were the same kind of gray, boxy things. They were driving a red van, and people were astonished to see this car. That people seemed relatively normal, and they said they were hungry. They stopped. They went into this restaurant, and everything on the menu was in this foreign language. And they said nobody seemed to speak English. It sounded like German to them, and they realized there are some Mennonite communities in Utah, or even Amish, I think, too. But they weren't. But they speak English too. I mean, and it turned these words sounded an awful lot to me like Dutch. And sure enough, I contacted a Dutch friend, and "Willkommen" is welcome in Dutch. It's not quite German. It's a different language, but it's in the same family, and so is English, as a matter of fact. So they managed to order something by pointing something out on the menu. There were pictures in the menu, and the proprietor gave them some odd looks, but it was friendly enough. Very good sandwiches, and they were astounded that he wouldn't take their paper money. He looked at it, he said, but he would take their coins. So they ended up paying a bunch of quarters for these two nice sandwiches, and off they went. And there were people all around their car looking at it in amazement, and they drove off rather quickly, because not too quickly, because they didn't want to end up in jail in this weird place. And they told their story later on to a historian, and then they said that this is completely impossible. So it sounds to me like a parallel world experience. I mean, I have no reason to believe they weren't. They were nuts or trying to pull the wool over my eyes. Very serious people. You kind of get to know that. Other people that these things have happened. There have been multiple witnesses and things of this kind. So, and we're still looking for something of that magnitude in this area. I have no doubt that there are, but 10 years I've been working on the case, and we're still encountering witnesses. Right now we're going to be looking into the gnome people, as this woman called them. Very often these have been interpreted as aliens. A lot of the not maybe about the fairy lore, but the lore of elves and gnomes in Europe. Some people have the opinion these were actually alien experiences, and very well could be. On the other hand, from what we've been talking about, you can have real smaller races from parallel worlds that might have access, and our folklore calls them fairies, which of course just invites disbelief, the word itself, and gnomes, whatever you want to call them. There could be smaller races of this kind, and some physical evidence has been found to that extent. So I don't know. Maybe not.
God. This is crazy.
Yes, exactly.
This is crazy.
Completely.
If somebody, okay, so can a human step into another dimension and come back out again?
Yes, shamans do that all the time, so they say. I was talking to one. I was in the line of duty in the military. I was in Australia for a grand total of 7 hours, and I spent most of it talking. I was waiting for extraction there, and I spent most of it talking with an Aboriginal elder on the porch of an old store outside Melbourne. And his name was Mindalooey. He must have been no more than 4 feet high, charming little fellow. And he was, I say, an Aboriginal elder. And they usually don't talk to outsiders, but he kind of took to me. And we had the most fascinating conversation. And I was telling him, at this point, this is in 1979, I was really getting to the point where I was wondering about these old spiritualist beliefs, and I thought maybe we're dealing more with parallel worlds. And he said, that is exactly right. So you are on the right track. He said, that's what we do, essentially. And he used a lot of Australian terms, and he didn't like Mr. Spock from Star Trek enough. But he was saying essentially that that's what they do. They will go into parallel worlds. That's their job. And to bring back what people need here. For example, if someone, he claimed he'd actually done this for someone with cancer. In his group, he had gone into a parallel world where this person did not have cancer, brought the worlds together in just the right way, so that's what the shamanic training is about, and the person didn't have cancer anymore. He had done, I guess, the opposite of or the same kind of thing I was talking about dropping the laptop earlier in the show. He had created another universe, and the person didn't have cancer anymore. This is what he said. He said, this is what shamans do. Physicists might say he had collapsed the wave function. The two worlds became one in the way that he wanted to be, which is kind of a good trick. From him and also a shaman of the Cree tribe in Quebec, they're two opposite sides of the planet, I heard stories of literally bringing people back from the dead. They said that there had been, they were children, and shamans in their group or tribe, whatever, when they were children, they had witnessed this, had at the behest of the families of the two people who had died, one of whom was a young boy in Australia, and the one in Quebec was a man of working age, young father of a young family, and they had died, and the young boy in Australia, literally, or both, were brought back, not by resurrection, not by any kind of reincarnation, nothing like that, but they had gone into parallel worlds where this boy and this man had not died, literally took them by the arm, this was the story I was told, pulled them back across these, the membrane of the parallel worlds, and there they were, right there again where they had been in the first place, all right? They realized this was not a good idea. There are reasons why things happen in the different worlds as they do, and the interactions are limited seemingly sometimes. And they said that the boy knew a couple of his siblings, but there were more siblings in this world than there were in his life in the other world, and he didn't know some of the neighbors, and he eventually lost his mind. Had to be hospitalized. In Quebec, the young man say he eventually he would walk to work every day past his own grave. You know?
Oh my God!
And I mean, and it was, he couldn't deal with it. He eventually kind of lost it as well. And I bet he ran away and they never found it. Probably died in the woods somewhere again. So, I mean, this is the sort of thing we're dealing with. And he said that they both told me the only reason that these previous shamans had done so is because they were, the families were grief-stricken and they paid them a lot of money, and but they said they knew it was not a good idea, and sure enough, apparently it was not. So I can go on and on all night with stories of this kind of approach to the paranormal, which indicates that it's not just a spirit world, that it's real physical worlds all interacting in sometimes very goofy ways, sometimes in really good ways. And that's the natural state of the world or the worlds we live in.
I mean, this is all new. This is all new to me.
Yeah, it is to most people. Yeah,
it is. Now, if somebody is able to go into another dimension, and it's a dimension. Okay. So in these dimensions, are they usually always back in time? Or is there anything that are forward in time?
Oh, sure, yeah. And I should just strictly speaking, other dimensions are not the same thing as parallel worlds, because within the worlds are various dimensions. Now, one of the ways physics in our particular whatever here is trying to explain this is through string theory. And again, there is a real desire in science to try to unite what is known in a logical way with what is not known, to unite the discovered science, or what they think is discovered science, with undiscovered science. So string theory is supposed to be essentially a way to unite Newtonian physics, the kind of physics you use to build a road or build a house that's logical, or to go to the moon or whatever, to unite it with the new fringe physics, which of course is quantum mechanics. And they're admitting the existence of 11 different dimensions. Okay. But that may be, I don't think that's all there is to it. But dimensions really are not the same. That's within our world. And also parallel worlds. So it's complicated, and I don't think it's good enough either. So, I think that they're not necessarily other times. They could be parallel to ours. But the thing to remember is that it really is all simultaneous. Now, I have asked regression therapists on many occasions. I always make it a point. These are people who will hypnotize you, again, if that's legitimate, and take you back to past lives. Now, if you think about that, if the theory we're talking about is true, you can't have past lives because there's no past in any objective sense of the word. There are parallel lives that are existing in what to our consciousness would be the past. So maybe it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But strictly speaking, you can't necessarily go back and, I'll give you an example. Okay. From my own experience. For many years, I was born here in Connecticut, and I moved to Rhode Island and has raised a family there. And we would travel to visit my mother in East Hartford, from Rhode Island, to visit her. And we would drive past a cemetery in near Scotland, Connecticut. And something drew me to that cemetery for years and years and years. And I couldn't quite understand why. And I pulled in one day by myself, and I walked into the cemetery. I was drawn immediately to the grave of a man named Reuben Marcy. Now, the Enos are an old New England family. As I mentioned, so is the lady of the house here, and we found out that we're distantly related because they're two old New England families, crawled out of the sea with the first lungfish under the shores of New England, right? So, but I am not related, as far as I know, to these Marcy, so it couldn't have been maybe ancestral memory. And, of course, people would say, aha, immediately. They would say, you must be the reincarnation of this Reuben Marcy, who died in 1835. But I don't think so. I think that there was a certain connection because in a parallel universe, I am Reuben Marcy. And these identities kind of blend into one big you at one point or another. But for some reason, there's an intersect or a connection here, and I feel a real identity with him, among other people. But again, you have to be careful of this because in our sort of narrow paradigm, well, in my day, that they put you in the psychiatric ward, or that they'll fill your pockets full of antipsychotic drugs today because they can't afford psychiatric wards anymore. So, but that's, I think, essentially what's going on. Reincarnation, as I said, and I would ask these regression therapists, have you ever had someone who will describe a world that you don't recognize? Because they'll always ask, okay, what year is it, or what? And they'll say, funny you should ask. Is that, some will say not often, but sometimes they will. One person from Vermont told me that she had regressed someone the previous week, and she had told her that asked her what year it was, expecting her to say, 1900 or something. And she said, it's 2148. Oh. And they said, what? But she said, this has happened before. Sometimes you will get a date that is a combination of letters and numbers or something they just don't recognize at all. And there do seem to be future lives as well as parallel lives. And they're beginning to admit what we're suggesting, that these are really simultaneous lives. Okay? And the principles, I guess, of reincarnation theory will still stand in a way because, if you're frightened by... if you're eaten by an alligator in one parallel life, you're going to be more frightened of alligators than most people across your whole consciousness, which will embrace your whole subconscious in this life and your whole conscious and zillions of other lives. I think that's really how it works. Phobias have been successfully treated in this way, but I don't think they realize that they're dealing with parallel lives rather than successive ones, and they're beginning to admit that they are.
Oh my God!
That's your question. Yes, the future does turn up, whatever that term may mean.
We're starting to get some questions. F Warrior wants to know: can you ask Paul what he thinks of out-of-body experiences, and are they related to parallel worlds?
Well, that's an interesting question. Out-of-body experiences. It is, and I'm thinking too of my friend Scott Rogo, who I was horrifying. I was a journalist at the Providence Journal, the major metro paper in Rhode Island, on the night of his murder. I was in the newsroom, and I was generally the wire editor. I would get the news service copy over the wires, over the computer, and decide what to put in the paper the next day. And the news of the murder of D. Scott Rogo had came over at that time. And I remember he was very much involved in out-of-body research. And he and Keith Harari, Dr. Keith Harari, who was involved in the Bridgeport case as a parapsychologist investigating in 1975, was involved in an experiment with with Scott. And he said he would be asleep and try to project himself out of his body in Scott's house. And sure enough, he seems to have done it. Scott swears that he was sitting in the living room there, and he saw Keith walking by in the hallway outside when Keith was trying to project himself. And there are numerous examples of this. One of the things that really knocked my socks off and really got me out of the old spiritualist paradigm and the theological paradigm into the parallel universe thing was a case in Maine I believe we've talked about before, Noreen, and that was just briefly one in York, Maine, York Harbor in 1979. And I should say 1978. And I was, as I say, I was just out of grad school, had nothing, and was living in a house by a lake in Connecticut. And people were starting to know who I was. And I got a call from a young girl who had experienced what I'm about to describe. And she and her sister and some friends had been in Maine, about 120 miles from where we were, maybe not that much. And she had, the young sister was well known for her interest in the paranormal and the occult. And at one point, she jumped out of the car. She said, "Stop the car. That's my house." They were on a country road, just going around a corner. And there was an ordinary garden variety ranch house sitting up there. And before they could stop her, the kid ran up the hill and went up to the door and started pounding on the door. Well, everybody else kind of ran up with her, saying, "What are you doing?" Well, a woman answered the door, screamed when she saw this girl, and kind of stumbled back into the house. A man came to the door, and couldn't speak when he saw the girl. And the girl, everybody kind of was a little bit creeped out by this time. So the girl said, "I'm sorry to intrude. I feel as though I know this house." And the man said, "You should know this house. You haunt it."
Oh my God.
Precisely. So I said, I've got to find out about this. Now, fortunately, the kids had the presence of mind to get the name on the mailbox when they were leaving the property. As luck would have it, my mother's family had had a vacation home near this town for over a century. My great-great-granduncle built it in 1878. So we knew some people around the area. So I found the name because of the address, and I didn't dare call the man. I figured he'd keel over for sure. So I sent him a letter. I put every reference I could think of, every priest, every psychologist I'd ever worked with in this field. And 3 days later, I got a phone call. And his voice was shaking. He said, "We have to talk to somebody about this." And as it turned out, they said they had seen this girl in transparent form walking down the stairs, looking out the front window. And the girl, whom I sent to Hartford for the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which is the MMPI. I think it's still used as a pre-diagnostic tool to see if you need the psychiatric treatment. And she said, when I debriefed her, that she had dreams, and that they did not talk to each other about this. They only through me. That they had seen her, she had seen she had dreams of doing precisely what they had dreams. She had dreams of doing what they had seen her doing in their house, although not at the same time, which I found very interesting. But I was so bowled over by this whole thing, I didn't get into that at the time. But the funny thing was that she was coming around the bend. And the first thing that popped into her mind was, why aren't there any toys in the yard? Because in these dreams, she was the mother of a couple of young kids, and that was her house. And she would do these routine things, like obviously walk down the stairs and look out the front window, since she was looking at the children playing in the yard. And this is what the homeowners in our world saw her doing. So you might say that these people were having similar experiences of the same parallel reality or similar parallel realities. Because as soon as that meeting took place on that porch, as you might say, the wave function was collapsed and all the two worlds were joined. Everything stopped. They never had those experiences again. So you could say that because this is a ghost, quote unquote, of someone who had not died, an out of the body experience. But in reality, once you look into it, it was, and I suppose you could still argue that it was that. But this girl had a vivid experience of being alive in a parallel world with children, having a whole life there, and you'll see that some of her dreams can be like that. Now, for many years, I worked at, of course, this newspaper I described, and you put out the morning paper the night before. So I'd work really, really late and get home. And my wife, to this day, works in a law firm, and it's a 9-to-5 job. So I would get up very early with our sons and take them to the bus stop in the morning. So I had broken sleep. I'd make up for the sleep in the afternoon, okay, because, that'd give you the whole 7 or 8 hours, right? So I would remember a lot of dreams, I think more than most people would because of that broken pattern, and I'd always write them down. I had whole memories of lives in what appeared to be parallel realities. There was a cafe on a street corner in a town in Pennsylvania where my wife and I would always stop and have a very pleasant lunch. We knew people, but of course this is just in a dream. Ben and I, when we started to work together, would have the same dreams at the same time. I would begin to describe it, he would finish it. Not only that, but apparently people all over the world were having similar experiences of a place we call the good world. That's got nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight. But we were on Coast to Coast with George Norrie, which has a lot bigger audience than our show does. And Ben and I discussed, should we talk about this? And sure enough, we decided to do it. And we got over 3,000 emails about this subject. We expected everybody to say, oh, you're crazy, or your credibility is shot. But no, all but 2 were positive. And one of the people who wrote one of the negative ones later apologized. And people would describe things we hadn't uttered a word about in this parallel reality we were talking about. So, places we had been to. And they can't all be crazy, especially when they're describing the same experiences with the same word. Thousands of people. And so I think that we're looking far more at the parallel reality thing than we are at out-of-the-body experiences, at least in their classical sense.
Oh, my God. All right, we have another question. Super Witchy, she wants to know, she said, my brother committed suicide in 2013. Could you ask Paul if when we pass on, if we go to a parallel universe?
Well, that's a vexed question because, actually, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on your show. It took me a long time to admit this on the air to be able to talk about it. I first got into the paranormal, really, I suppose, at the age of 7, when I was witness to my father's suicide. A hideous experience beyond description, as you can imagine. And I was, at the time, in very strict Roman Catholic school. My father was a Congregationalist, Protestant. My mother was a strict Roman Catholic. Matter of fact, as I said, my brother was a priest, and I studied for the priesthood. I was in 2nd grade in a Roman Catholic school, and the Sisters of Mercy, or some might say alleged mercy, some of them were absolute saints. Others would have been axe murderers if they weren't nuns. Fortunately, I had one of the former. She was a saint, Sister Mary Joel. I'll never forget her beautiful face. She got me through this, and essentially, I was like, we were taught that if you had a hot dog on Friday, you were fried, literally. I said, is my father in hell this wonderful man who took care of me at home because of his heart condition in a time when that was very unusual? And she said, essentially, God is bigger than all that, which I believe. And so she got me through that terrible time. But over the years, I went, where is my father? And our home was very peaceful. That's where it happened, but we never had any problems that I knew about anyway. Certainly, I lived there, my whole young life. And later on in the seminary, I began to, on my own, because we weren't taught about this stuff, at least not at that level. I was wondering about the doctrine of purgatory, which, if anybody's got a nodding acquaintance with the Roman Catholicism, is a, they have to kind of, if you are not quite bad enough to go to hell or not quite good enough to go to heaven, you go to purgatory for a while to be purged, hence the word, of your sins before, and then you can get into heaven, in order to satisfy their mania for making things fit with terrestrial perception. Anyway, and that was the impetus for my first paranormal case, which was this case in Pomfret, Connecticut in 1970 and to 1972. Multiple witnesses to all kinds of very interesting phenomena. I thought these might have been souls in purgatory. Well, it didn't take long at this location for me to realize that, at least in my opinion, these people weren't dead at all, never mind in any kind of purgatory. They were going about their lives, driving invisible ox carts, working on farm implements, calling their kids into the house. They weren't dead at all. So that's a long answer to a short question, but I think that when we pass, I think that we simply, it's like a leaf falling off a tree as far as our body is concerned. We're not the leaf, we're the whole tree. So I think that we're simply already living a lot of lives, and maybe things happen, as I described earlier. Ben was killed in that little car crash, but then his consciousness simply went on in a world where that didn't happen, because that's what happened. And people write to us about these consciousness shifts all the time. At some point, I think we have to make a real shift, here or there. But I don't know. I think people ask what happens when you die. Maybe nothing happens when you die, And I think that there may be a point to some of the mystics' contentions that we do some. Hopefully, most of us get better as we go, and that we perhaps end up in a good world type of place, which is not perfect, but it gets better. I think that it has to do with realizing that we are part of, and this is where suicide comes in again, where we are part of a greater whole. It is not about me, it's not about you, it's about us. And that sounds, maybe liberal and trendy, but it's absolutely true, because I think the whole multiverse is this elegant kind of unity, and the more you go with it, the more happy you will be, and the more simple will be your progression, perhaps. Even reincarnation, as some of them believe this, you gradually get better. Now, you have to make the caveat that, and I learned this from a 5-year-old boy who was dying of leukemia in 1991. I don't know if you've dealt with terminally ill children, but very often they become totally other-centered, not these little ego machines we see very often, in our daily lives with children. There's a little boy named Peter in Connecticut, and he told me about the high men and the low men. He said there are two different species of human beings, and he learned this from his grandfather, who had died 10 years before he was born, and with whom he spoke regularly. That's why his parents called me into the case, because it was amazing. He said that they're really two different kinds of human beings. So if this is true, the high people might be the ones who realize that it's not about me, it's not all ego. In our society, I don't know, doesn't really, breed that kind of person, I don't know. And then the low people who will take, destroy themselves and others because of their intense ego, which cuts them off from the multiversal unity. This all gets into philosophy here. So I think that suicide is an act of complete disunification. Now, certainly, though, there are those who are in complete despair, realizing they don't have any way out, or thinking they don't have any way out. But as one who has experienced it almost firsthand, I think that that was the case with my father. Others, I've worked with, so to speak, people who have committed suicide, or who were about to in parallel reality. That sounds really nuts, but I believe it's true. I think that in some cases I've talked them out of it, and in other cases, I've found them in worlds of utter aloneness. They kind of got what they wanted. Be careful what you wish for. And so, now I'm not saying that that's the case with this listener's brother. I mean, I don't know. It could have been more like my father, just complete despair and perhaps even a brain condition, a tumor that influences behavior. Anything could influence that. But I think in some cases it can be an act of absolute selfishness. People who want to get back at their families or whatever. I don't know. It depends on the case. But I have encountered suicides who are in worlds of endless aloneness. And when there has been possible communication, and I hate to talk about this because it sounds like I'm doing the medium thing, and I always criticize that. But there are times when you can talk to the neighbors in certain ways and times, and I think I've done that. But it's difficult to answer. Where did he go? I think that was kind of up to him, and hopefully it was not a world of endless aloneness. That's really the best way I can put it.
Now, do you believe in reincarnation then? Do you believe that when we die, if we want to come back, we'll come back?
Well, I don't think it works that way. I think we're dealing with parallel lives we're already living, and this is a really hard concept.
Yeah.
Since there is no past, no future in any objective sense. You can't have reincarnation in the classic sense. I think, again, what you have are parallel lives, which can be very different, past or future, or similar to just smooth transition, such as Ben may have had in the case of that theoretical traffic accident. I think that the question, in a way, has no meaning. We're always there in one form or another, in one life or another. Most of it is physical. And I think that worlds in which we could be pure energy are possible, because anything we can conceive of is possible. But I don't think they are close to the world families in which we find ourselves in forms such as we find ourselves. And I don't think that the whole spirit thing really makes itself all that present in a world like ours or in our world family. What I mean by world family is that we're passing through parallel worlds all the time. But our consciousness, I think our whole consciousness, not only as a species of humans, but as a whole biosphere, the whole pattern of life, keeps it logical, more or less, from one world to another, second by second. I think that but I think that that's not a perfect progression. I think how often do you put your car keys down on a kitchen table? You turn around and they're on the other side of the table, or they're gone completely, and then we say, "Oh, it's just one of those things," and they were in your pocket all the time, and so what? Well, these are all little glitches, perhaps, in the pattern of this progression we make through millions of parallel worlds every day. And I think that when we have a major collision, perhaps with another world family, in which gravity is not quite what it is in ours, and the refrigerator in the Bridgeport house in 1974 floats into the air in front of myself and 3 police officers and 3 firefighters, there may be an intersection going on there that we interpret as a ghost or something, but it's really not. So I think that, when we die, we could very easily just wake up, gee, what a funny dream that was, or just not even notice the transition at all. Or notice that we are an entirely different species in an entirely different world. And yes, we can, I think it depends. It's like anything else in nature, Noreen. I think it's the path of least resistance. If we are low people, to use the little boy's term, we make our own hells. I think that we can pass into worlds that are very similar to the ones we're in, that we made for ourselves, and we make our own bed in the multiverse. I think, we can't put ourselves in hell. This is why I tell mediums. They say, "Oh, I sent him to the light." They talk.
Yeah.
And I say, "Well, oh yeah, right. That light is simply a world boundary. And if this really happened the way you think it did, you could have sent the person to a hellish world. Just because you didn't hear from them again doesn't mean you sent them to someplace that's positive. But because they think there's just this physical world and like this so-called and this spirit world across this veil. Well, I got news for you, kids. In my experience, there are millions and millions and millions of other sides of all possible kinds and all possible natures. When you send that person across the boundary into another one, you may have sent them to hell.
Oh my God.
Precisely. So,
Oh my
and
God.
they look at me, just because they don't hear from them again. I've done a good day's work. No idea, no clue.
That's
In my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I always say that. Maybe they're right, but I doubt it.
oh no. Oh wow. That's you know what? You know what would really be a good show is to have you come on and talk about paranormal investigating and what these investigators are doing or what they think they're doing when they're out there going to people's most of them go to people's homes, which I don't think should be allowed. Period.
Well, I'm waiting for the lawsuits. Civil suits, paranormal malpractice or something, Because I'll tell you, and Shane, whom I've been mentioning throughout, a dear friend of mine, he has gone into cases where some of the major names have been involved, made a dog's lunch out of the whole situation, and he's had to go in and straighten it out, right? And we find this. I was on a show recently with one of the major names, and I just got the impression that I was being perceived as a threat because they don't like very often what we have to say. Sometimes they're two-dimensional thinkers. I don't mean to be overly critical. Some of them are great people, but they've never been exposed to this kind of thinking, and some of them make a living at this. And I don't trust people who make a living at this. In fairness, if you've written a bunch of books, and you make that's one thing. But if you make a living by charging people or whatever, or even from speaking fees, I don't trust that because you have a vested interest in things being weird. This is just part of my work as a professional journalist, and I make a living from journalism, and this is just part of that. And I just I don't make a living at it, so they just perceive me as a threat, and Ben too sometimes as a threat to their living, perhaps, and that's why we're invited to speak at many more UFO conferences than we are at your garden variety paranormal conferences. I think.
Interesting.
We've even been told as much sometimes.
Wow. All right, we have another question. Bobby wants to know, where does a shadow person come from?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Where does a shadow person come from? Well, of course, the first question that has to be asked is, what is a shadow person?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
Now, there have been shadow people seen in this house, okay, here. And for those who are tuning in late, we're in the house that Ben and I started the investigation of, the Litchfield County, Connecticut paranormal flat, as we call it. And we call it Paranormal Grand Central Station, or Paranormal Psychic Circus, or whatever you want to call it. And those types of things have been seen here. And the question is, what are they? There are many theories about this. We had an expert on the show. As a matter of fact, she's Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who was writing the preface for one of my upcoming books. And a very dear friend, although we agree on two things. We're friends, and today is Thursday. That's about it. But she believes that shadow people, of which she has done a lot of research, are essentially you're talking about the jinn here, the Arab concept, or demonic negative figures. Okay, that some of them, I have no doubt that we would say parasites, possibly parasites. Others may be simply, as we were talking about before, ordinary, normal, well, not normal, maybe alien to us creatures or life forms or people from seen across the boundary or the membrane of a parallel reality, parallel world, and we just see them in that form. So there is dark plasma. Again, assuming that electrified air molecules from the electromagnetic boundaries between worlds could manifest in a dark way. So maybe you see them as that. Others do seem to be interactive, do seem to be aware of us, do seem to kind of be pests around the house at times. These could be parasitical entities. I think it really depends on what the situation is. I think you can read a lot about the paranormal experience by the people who experience it, because these experiences depend on the people who experience them. Not that they're not real, but the people bring their own energy, their own attitudes to these experiences, and very often, especially if it's a parasite, what they get back will be what they bring to the experience.
But
You know,
Paul, there are people that have experienced shadow people, and they'll wake up and that shadow person will be right on top of them, choking them.
sure. I've seen cases of that. Now, from one point of view, you have to get into the idea of sleep paralysis. There are medical conditions where that can occur, and I'm always a little bit not concerned, but interested in experiences that occur on the cusp of sleep. You know, just before you're going to sleep, and especially when you're just waking up, you are very, very sensitive. It's very quiet, and people. I myself often hear voices right in my ear. That I don't take very seriously because I think that it's just one of the phenomena that occurs when you come out of sleep, especially if in sleep you've been in touch with perhaps parallel existences. Okay, but no, it is possible. There have been parasite entities that have, as I say, these physical contacts. I have had physical contacts with them, and have been known. It's an old belief that these will. It's sometimes called night terrors or the hag or whatever. Incubus and succubus, because that goes a little farther than choking. But I actually have witnessed cases in which there have been hand marks around the necks of people in these cases. And these always, in my investigations, turned out to be parasitical entities that had convinced the person that they were human ghosts. In the particular case I'm thinking of from 1998, I actually had someone stay in the room, sit with the woman, another woman, stay in the room with the victim at night. And she actually woke up, and she sat up, and she had these marks around her neck. And the entity responsible was, I'm absolutely sure, was a parasite. As a matter of fact, it would stay in the wall, and we would study each other. It was really quite interesting. And it was very ancient, very wise in the ways of its own species. As a matter of fact, I think it was a top shelf of the 9 different species of parasites. And it was really very interesting because it would, you kind of knew that I had its number, and it didn't bother me. But we were able to get rid of it simply by what I said before, bringing in positive energy. I don't think we got rid of it. We kind of put it to sleep. That can happen because you cut off its food supply. But they can move around and do other things. But I think that this was a shadow person. It was seen in that way, and it was a parasite, definitely. Others may be something else. But I think that, in a way, Rosemary Ellen Guiley may have a point that you're dealing with negative entities in a lot of cases with these shadow people.
Oh, yeah. Now, you're familiar with ghost boxes, and now we have ghost hunter apps that was geniusly created by Anthony Sanchez. And so when they are using these ghost apps or ghost boxes or whatever, and they're getting communication, who do you think they're communicating with? Are they actually communicating with the person who they think they're talking to?
Well, that depends. I really don't know. I'm still looking into that, but I'm a little suspicious of things that are sold, especially in the internet, ghost boxes and things of this kind. There are serious experts who have done research on this, and one we had on the show, he was later discredited for something else, but he came on and said, well, he had found that he believed in the parallel world thing, and that the signals received were AM signals, amplitude modulated signals, like you'd hear on an AM radio, that were being received by these devices from whatever other side you're talking about. So my last question to him, and we were running out of time, and I did have a chance to ask him, and I didn't see him after that, was, well, does that mean that whoever's on the other side has an AM transmitter? I mean, what are you talking about here? You know, so I think it's an open question. It's interesting. My first case, I'm thinking of 1971 in the lost village of Pomfret, Connecticut, the Village of Voices case. We stood there, and this is 6 seminary students and a photo expert, above a brook where there were all these things going on, the invisible ox carts and all the farm implements, and you could hear we heard children laughing at the bottom of the hill next to a stream and moving in a very, very strange, rapid up and down movement along the stream. And no cars, no road anywhere near the place, etc. And we tried to record it. Now, this is back in dinosaur days, you know, when we had cassette tapes.
Yeah, you know, yeah.
And nothing would record. So it's kind of like an EVP in reverse. So I'm wondering, when you have EVPs of things you don't hear with your naked ear, what precisely is going on? if the actual voice is taking place, and Ben could talk more to this because he's a sound expert, is what his degree is in. I'm wondering, how do you make sounds without vocal cords? If these purportedly are spirits with no bodies, how do you make sounds? And if you do make the sounds that are picked up, then you would hear them with the naked ear. Okay?
Like growling,
now,
for
there are
instance.
arguments against that, I know.
Oh, well, I mean, people have actually heard on the growling. You can actually hear growling.
That's been heard in this house on recorded media.
Oh, not with your own ears?
You've never heard growling with your own ears in the house? No.
Has she ever heard conversations with her own ears?
Oh, yes, you've heard conversations with your own ears. Conversations humming. Records playing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, things like that. You know, as it's a normal day for somebody else. Sounds of the general store. Things unrolling like fabric or something, as if, and of course, if this theory I've been spouting is correct, it still is the general store in 1800 or 1805, and those sounds still are taking place, and, you're in close proximity with parallel worlds in a place like this.
Okay, I want to ask you a question then. So that is probably, like you said, still continuing on today from the 1800s. So, if somebody dies, so you die, and you are giving an opportunity to say, relive your life again, could that person go back to the 1800s, or would they come back into current time?
I think it depends on the person, because you make your own bed in the multiverse, as I say. I think it really depends on you. Whatever is the path of least resistance, you may engage in multiple consciousnesses. You may be living different lives at the same time. Here, as I say, you used to get locked up, and now they call you schizophrenic, give you a bunch of drugs. But people who are aware of these other lives, and Ben and I try to be aware of lives we're living in a parallel way, because I think that it's all you, and it can become a greater whole within you. Okay, I think that it's entirely possible that occurs with some people. So if you are fragmented within yourself, if you're living again a life that's introverted and just is more concerned about you than you are about others, then you probably will be aware of a life. You may be very well, because especially if you suffer, very aware of bodily death. But I think that. And people report being received by relatives and all this sort of thing, and near-death experiences. However, that can be artificially created in a laboratory, which doesn't mean that it's not real. So maybe they really do lead you to another life, or maybe it's just a transitory experience. I don't know. I've never had a near-death experience that I know.
No, I know. It's really because so then if this person, say they were happy in the 60s and they were given the opportunity to say, hey, I don't want to go back in your current time. I want to go back into the 60s. So would that person, because they supposedly, the people that we are associated with now, like your husband, your kids, or whatever, in another life, they were something else. One of them could have been your mother or your whatever. You're all you're still connected, but in a different way. So yes. if you are going to relive your life again, would you live it would it be the same life over again, or would you have the opportunity to have a different life, and would you still be connected with the same people?
Well, anything is possible, because I don't know who was all that happy in the 60s, but if you were having the way you put it, Noreen, indicates that somebody decides for you where and when you go. Okay.
Oh, they do?
Maybe someone does. I don't know. I think.
Well,
God
wouldn't you be able to have wouldn't you be able to have your choice?
Well, who gives you the choice? I think you have your choice by the way. Perhaps you live your life, and whether you are a selfish jerk or not. I think you make your own. I think we have a lot more to do with our own fates than we realize. I don't know if I'm sure that the love you have for your ancestors. I'm just not prepared to say that somebody who someone who carried out the Sandy Hook shootings, down here, which is right within our flap area here, a few years ago, is going to be met in a loving way by his relatives and taken into paradise. I'm not prepared to believe that. I think within the multiverse there is justice somehow. And I believe in God, whatever he, she, it, or them may be. And it's I think our own participation in all these things, not just paranormal phenomena, in our fate, in wherever and whenever we are. And it's not that we go anywhere, because we're already there. We're already in all the worlds where we live. So as far as where our transition goes, where our primary consciousness may go, of whatever meaning that may have, is really how we have lived here. So in a way, you can see where the theology, how it developed, you can see what it's the clothing for some very deep realities. In other words, heaven and hell. Okay, if you're a good person, you go to heaven. If you're a bad person, you go to hell. Well, in a way, that's true. Maybe not all the theological baggage, like this and that, but I think we really do make. If we're selfish, negative jerks here, our next awareness of what, at least from here, may be a hellish one. If we are Mother Teresa, or realize that it's really about other people, and we fulfill our responsibilities, and try, that we have, in a sense, if you want to use a Protestant term, justified ourselves, and perhaps our path of least resistance, natural transition, if it is a transition, will be to just be aware of where we already are in a far more positive place, time, reality, whatever. The trouble is, Noreen, our language isn't really quite up to actually talking about this, and we run into that problem all the time. So I hope I've expressed it in some way, but I think it's really up to us.
All right, we have another question. Nancy wants to know about deja vu.
Interesting question, yeah. I think we've all had that deja vu, of course, being the experience of, well, put simply, of feeling that whatever you're going through at the moment is something you've done before or felt before, like I've been here before, that kind of thing. I think the reason for that is that you are in that place in parallel realities. So you really have, not really have, it's not past, you really are there. And that's why you have that feeling. I think it's as simple as that. Sometimes it goes back to dreams. People believe that you had a dream of doing that before it occurred. But because there is no past and future in any objective sense, you're really just sort of intersecting or touching a moment, which you really are experiencing, okay, as past, future, whatever. But again, it's not some big supernatural mystery that you have been prophetic in the sense of telling the future, because there really is no future. You're just feeling the moment, so to speak. You're just experiencing the moment. That's my belief, anyway.
April wants to know if we are changing dimensions when we dream.
I think that is possible. I'll give it, as I say, I've done a lot of research of my own dreams, and other people have written into us about dreams. And I think that what's happening, I'll give you an example. I was having a dream where I was in it was not a dark world, it was nighttime. And there was a wall, and there was a lovely garden on the other side. Secret garden, I've never even read that. But there was a little door, and it was locked. And I wanted to get into the garden. So I said, okay, it was a lucid dream, which means you realize you're dreaming and you can manipulate the environment to some degree. I said, I'll just fly over the wall. So up I went. And as I came over the wall, there was a burst of, like a breeze, and some leaves blew off a tree. It was a maple leaf, I remember. And I grabbed one in midair as I descended into the garden. And then I woke up. I felt that leaf in my hand. And I lay there for a minute, and I still felt that leaf. I was sure that I was going to pull my hand up out of those covers and see that leaf. And of course, I didn't. So I think that and the experiences of my wife at that Pennsylvania cafe and 100 other places, 100 other times, past and future, were experiences of parallel lives. That's my personal belief. So yes, I think that's entirely possible.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Let's see. All right. Jeremy wants to know, and about the Hoya forest in Romania, but he said Hoya backup forest in Romania.
Backup forest?
I know there's a Hoya forest in Romania, which is very strange.
Heard of that, but I'm not familiar enough with the term to speak about it with any sort of intelligence.
Okay.
Romania being famous for the vampire legends and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I did a show one time, and it was we did a show on the Hoya Forest in Romania, and I know it's very strange, but that was a couple years ago, and I can't remember. All right, we have Mary Lou. Ask Paul about old souls, as in talent, prodigy, singers, musicians as children.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I've been called an old soul. Ben has been called an old soul, and the origin of the term is essentially, or the meaning behind the term is essentially, you've lived many past lives, picked up a lot of knowledge and stuff, and you brought it to your current life. Okay, well, that's all very nice and quaint, but again, as we've said, that's not really, if we're correct, that's not really how it works. I think what it really may be is that you are in touch with very many lives that you are living right now. And I think that the essence of a higher spirituality is to be in touch and be aware of these lives and to glean from them wisdom, knowledge, learn where you've made stupid mistakes, and all sorts of interesting things can happen from that. Now, why is it that Mozart was able to sit down at the age of 4 and write his first piano concerto? And of course, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart being probably one of the most prolific and brilliant composers of all time, and performers as well. How was he able to do that? I think that and many other child prodigies, old souls, are people who are not necessarily old souls, but broad or wide souls, aware souls, that may not even realize it. They're just aware of where they are prodigies in the parallel reality, and that they're together enough within their consciousness and subconsciousness to let those talents come out in this particular reality. I think it's as simple as that.
I've always wondered, and I've heard, I've always wondered about people's intelligence. Why are so many people, why are there people that are intelligent like you, or intelligent like the guest I had last week? She's part of Mensa. You guys have extremely high IQs. Anthony Sanchez, who is a genius with this software that he creates. And I also heard, too, that there are people that have been abducted by aliens, and when they come back, their IQ is different. They have gifts that they never had before. Is there anything on that you could tell me?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I remember, and I'm thinking that this happens sometimes in alien abduction experiences, as you say, but I'm also thinking of the Mothman phenomenon in the 1960s in the middle of the Ohio Valley, where this creature that the press dubbed Mothman, because people would see this really scary figure with no neck and or really no head, the eyes where the shoulders would be, this sort of thing, that would fly and terrify everybody and all this business. And people would describe, and I've talked to a few of the witnesses from that period, and they said the only thing they remember as their first experience of this was utter and complete terror of this creature, the alienness of it. That, by the way, was a paranormal flap in my book, because there were UFO sightings. There were the Mothman sightings themselves. There were ghosts. People felt that they were having increased psychic abilities. There were people people told me this. They heard footsteps on their roofs. There were men in black. I mean, pretty much you name it. But I think that there were several people who reported to us that they had positive Mothman experiences. They weren't terrified. I'm thinking of one person in particular who said that he and his whole family had the experience, and he became much better in school, and he developed a tremendous artistic talent. And I think that what may have happened was that in the parallel world intersect that allowed him to have the Mothman experience, to have the Mothman figure present in this world of reality, and sometimes they were very present, very physical, that there was some sort of intersect with another world in which he had these talents, and he collapsed the wave function. He was able to, as the shamans would do, go and connect with that, even in his subconscious, and he became sort of a different person. Other people have come back, as you say, from some of these experiences that have had physical changes in their house, things of that kind, not only in their personalities. The near-death experience, very often has changed people. They become more spiritual or more aware. I think that the whole thing is just a matter of becoming aware of lives you're already living or worlds you're already touching or living in what we refer to so blithely as our subconscious. I think that's traceable to that.
Damn. All right, another question. Tiffany, she'd like to hear your thoughts on Dudleytown in Cromwell, Connecticut. It is a supposedly haunted ghost town that was cursed into extinction.
Okay, well, actually, it's not in Cromwell. It's very near where I sit right now in western Connecticut. Actually, I have never been there. The Warrens were there. They told me about it. I knew all about it, but I don't feel like getting arrested by the state police, who kind of really guard the place at the behest of the property owners. However, I have talked to lots of people who've been there and studied it. Many people went there, experienced nothing whatsoever. There were a bunch of Boy Scouts walking through, this kind of thing. As far as curses, well, as the shaman in Australia told me in '79, a curse really doesn't work unless you believe in it.
Oh.
And here we go, participating again in a paranormal experience, as we described, that you have to do. So I think that whether it was cursed, I think sometimes there definitely have been phenomena there. There have been reliable reports of all sorts of things going on. A little more negative than what we experienced in its sister abandoned village across on the other side of the state, in Pomfret, Connecticut, which I mentioned earlier. I think that very often the stories are sometimes invented to refer to the phenomena, but I know for a fact historically, and one of the other things I do as under my journalist hat is I write as historical articles and books as a historian. The village was not wiped out. Very often these villages, the ground gave out, or people just moved away, or they died off, and there were greener pastures elsewhere. And I don't think there's anything particularly ominous in the history of Dudleytown that I know of it. So I think that's part of the folklore that has attached itself to that particular location.
All right, another question. F. Warrior wants to know, ask Paul if religious objects have any power against dark entities. Is it the positive intent or actual object that protects?
That's a very, very, very good question. Your listeners are just as intelligent as ours. Maybe they're the same listeners. I don't know. Very good question. Now, of course, as growing up, strict Roman Catholic, we always had everything blessed. And later on, as Orthodox, which that's a seminary that threw me out, they bless things too. But I happen to notice when you bless something, and the Orthodox have I'm talking about the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, have the great blessing of water, as they call it, on certain feast days. And they will have a huge, huge vat of water. And the entire community will come around it. And to me, what they're doing is they're infusing positive energy. And what is water? Water is part hydrogen, which is really the primary element of the whole material universe, and oxygen, of course, which we breathe. And how more basic can you get? And in a way, you're kind of sanctifying the universe, the basic elements of the universe, the basic elements of our lives. And I thought that was kind of nifty, right? And then the people, at least in the Orthodox Church, will take it in bottles. They'll take it home and use it for the whole year, and they will drink it when they're ill. They'll stand right there in the church and drink it, And that's kind of weird to people in the West, but the holy water is there to sanctify the whole body, etc. And when the Roman Catholics are kind of big on blessing objects, so you get the same idea. If you have a rosary beads or something like this, you will sprinkle the water on it and kind of bless it. And that there is a great belief that attaches to that these are powerful objects in one way or another. So to answer the question, I've seen this in exorcisms particularly. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. Sometimes the object has, and again, I think, this, as I've said before, this is a participatory experience. I would not take a cross into a Muslim home or a Jewish home and use that, because it needs to, I think, mesh with the beliefs, which beliefs do what? They give power to thought. They give power to our environment to make it one way or the other. If you're negative and you're a jerk, you're going to make your whole environment negative, and that's going to possibly attract parasites, depending on geomagnetic circumstance and this kind of thing. And in the same way, when you have objects like this, I think objects of this kind, in and of themselves, are not what works. It's united with the participation of the person who's using them. I've seen teddy bears work for little scared children in parasite cases. You know, they participate, and I don't think anybody's blessed the teddy bear, but it's a participatory experience. So yeah, I've seen crosses have tremendous power. I've seen the name of Jesus have incredible power. I've also seen the name of the goddess Isis. I'm not talking about these awful terrorists, but the goddess have tremendous power. You know,
really?
It all depends on what you're working with, how you are, what you believe, and I would not try to impose a belief on a household that did not have that particular belief system. Although there have been times when there's no belief and one or the other has worked. So again, it depends on how the people participate in it. But yeah, you've got, I think the objects have power as objects that concentrate your power.
All right, Andrew wants to know about falling dreams.
Oh, falling dreams, okay. There's a rumor that you can't fall and hit the ground like you'll die in a dream. I don't think that's true because it's happened to me and I'm still here, I think, anyway, unless I'm having one of those parallel world things. But yeah, it's very interesting. There are the falling dreams, there are the flying dreams. I have a lot of dreams where I can only fly so much. Most of my dreams at this point, I think this might be because of cultivating the multiverse awareness, are lucid. In other words, I know I'm dreaming. But I can't always influence the environment, which I'd like. When I fall, I very often find that I can take charge of it and just fly and land normally, or just fly, you know. But usually people wake up before they hit. And again, it's the old saying, it's not the fall you mind, it's the sudden stop at the end, you know. So, but these particular dreams, again, I think they're very personal. I'm not sure what he wants to know about falling dreams. That's about all I can say without a further extrapolation on the question. Yeah. But I don't believe people, it's going to hurt you at all. And in my case, I generally pull out of it or whatever. And I don't have an awful lot of them. But people do. And I think that can they be reflections of daily life? Sure. Our daily life is not divorced from our multiversal life. It's really part of it. And experiences you've had during the day, yeah, they can come out in your dreams, but the dream may be an experience of a parallel life, maybe not. All depends.
All right, Kathy wants to know, what about dreams that are prophetic?
What about dreams that are prophetic? I'm being offered something for my voice here. Thank you, yes. Okay. Dreams that are prophetic. Well, I think we touched on that. And I think that when you have a dream, we touched it on the deja vu question, perhaps. I think the prophetic dreams about your own life are simply, in my belief, are experiences where you're actually experiencing that in your life. Again, they're not really being a future, past in an objective sense, in the linear sense of time, because it's a function of our consciousness and it being a simultaneous experience of a parallel awareness of a certain event occurring. Now, that being said, there are people who have premonitions of global catastrophes or plane crashes or things that affect a sphere that is much greater than ourselves. And really, it is ourselves. I mean, we're part of each other. But I've had people come to me and say, well, I had a premonition of this plane crash, and it did. I myself, when I was in the seminary, believed I had a premonition of a plane crash that did not occur. However, the person did die. As a matter of fact, I went to a lawyer and had an affidavit drawn. I've never told anyone this before. Had an affidavit drawn up that said, I believe that this is going to happen, like next year sometime. I never did anything. I still got it somewhere. This is decades ago, and it didn't occur. But the person I thought was going to die did, not in the same year, but very shortly thereafter. And whether that could have been a coincidence, I don't know. But in any case, it was a rather disconcerting experience. But I think that, again, these are experiences of parallel worlds where something is happening on a global scale or the community scale or other people it's happening too, and I think we share in lives in these worlds just as they do. I've had people come to me and say that they've had experiences of catastrophes on other planets, or happening to creatures they didn't recognize, or very good things happening. I think that these are all experiences of parallel realities that are making themselves known in our own consciousness right here and now. I think that's essentially what they are. Should you go to people and tell them you think things are going to happen? Well, that's a matter for judgment. In my case, I would have been very embarrassed that I made it public. But nevertheless, it often happens. Sometimes we'll have these experiences, and they will happen, but not quite in the way that we expected them to. But again, all things being possible, and the other people have asked, are we helping to bring them about by even making the suggestion that they could happen if we've had these dreams? That is possible too, because we participate, as I say again and again, in whatever occurs, paranormal or not. So it's an open question in a way, but I think, again, parallel world experience.
Mm-hmm. And Karate Sean, he wants to know about, I guess they're cryptids, a goat man, Jersey Devil, and he wants to know what is the story behind these.
Oh yeah, that's interesting too. Well, I don't know. I know of the goat man. I haven't met him. I haven't investigated that personally, but I have investigated the Jersey Devil. That is quite interesting. The legend has it, or sometimes called the Leeds Devil, L-E-E-D-S, after the town, where a young child was born and wasn't normal and supposedly flew off out the window and all this. But obviously that's, I think, nonsense. But the experience of this winged, horse-like creature, more or less, that's most descriptions, that live in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, mm-hmm. that if you're on top of the Empire State Building on the observation deck, you can see from really New York City with a pair of binoculars. It's a wilderness area. A lot of people don't realize. They think New Jersey is all like Newark or somewhere. It's a very beautiful state. And in the central part and the southern part, the central part, of course, you have the Pine Barrens, there's square miles of wilderness area, pretty much, all of which is pretty much protected at this point. But the Jersey Devil supposedly lives there. There have been flaps, I suppose, of the Jersey Devil. In 1909, it supposedly attacked, mm-hmm. That's the word the press used, the suburbs of Philadelphia, which are not all that far away on the other side of the state line from central Jersey or North Jersey. And people would see it landing on their rooftops with like this winged creature and this sort of thing. And all this business. There were supposedly police officers who experienced it as well. And there have been sightings quite frequently from time to time, in particularly in the early 20th century. Now, however, I was in contact with a police officer from that vicinity who swore that he saw it, and his grandmother swore that she saw it looking in her window, which was on the second story of her house. And reports of this kind. Some of the monster hunters, so-called, have been out looking for it, and there have been reports of it. Now, again, what is it? If it is a quote-unquote monster, it might be, again, one of these entities from a parallel reality. I would like to get down there sometime and look at it as I look at this area here in Connecticut. Are there parallel world intersects? Are other phenomena going on? I'm not aware of too many that I've heard about. Are there UFO sightings? It would be a matter of correlating reports from MUFON of UFO sightings with reports of the Jersey Devil, ghosts, other kinds of cryptids, Bigfoot, this kind of thing. And I have not done that as yet. I've just looked at the Jersey Devil phenomena by itself, and of course you really can't do that. So I hope in the future to get down there and do more work on that and expand the investigation as we've done. Oh, yeah.
Let me know when you do.
Yeah, well, I also want to take in a hockey game of the Jersey Devils, which are named after the Jersey Devils.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. We have another question. Diane Zeman Marks, our old friend, Diane.
Yes.
She wants to know, I'd like to know if the veils or portals can move, or does or do you think it's limited to certain areas?
Okay, that's two parts of a very interesting question. Yes, I think they can move. As I mentioned earlier, I believe we've done that in this house. Ben and I made efforts to move the portals or intersect points out of here, just to give them some peace and quiet, and it worked for a little while. It was pretty quiet for quite a while, I guess, several months. However, they do tend to move on their own, and they can move in or out on their own as well. However, I think that the geotechnic factors under the site, again, as I mentioned, the high water table, if there is one, sandy or clay soils, other things, the presence of quartz, granite, can all have an influence on where the portals are and why they're there. So, yes, they can move. As far as, what was the second half of the question?
Diane, or does he think it's limited to certain areas?
Oh, right. Okay. I think, the whole idea of the flap and the triangle can be very arbitrary, I think, as I mentioned. In this particular vicinity, Ben and I traced the triangle, as I say, from this house to the farm where all the weird stuff was going on, military stuff, to a third point in the middle of the woods north of here. And but how do you tell? But there's stuff going on in the 50-mile radius as well. But how can you tell what is definitely connected with the energies of the flap and what is not? And why is it that in certain areas, say in central New York State, as far as I'm aware, you don't have that sort of intense activity going on. Maybe you do. Maybe it's just not reported. And we've asked ourselves, are these flap areas just the result of the tremendous information flow we have today with the internet? Everybody knows everything immediately and will report stuff sometimes whether it happened or not, and we're just getting the impression of it. These are all questions that have to be taken seriously. However, to the best of our knowledge, to the best of our research, areas like this really are the center of certain areas, of certain flaps, and where the exact boundaries we don't know. But I think that the geotechnic factors may be key to why certain areas are less active in this way and why things are more active in other areas, such as we said, the intersecting rivers. Water, again, seems to be a factor. Some of the worst cases have been at lakeside homes that we've seen. Some of the wildest events. So there could be underground rivers. In the Bridgeport case, there were geotechnic factors that were interesting that we didn't know about at the time and didn't consider. So I think it depends a lot on that.
Okay. Another question from Mama Joe. What are your thoughts on tall aliens and abductions / human communication?
Okay, well, tall aliens. Very often in abduction cases, or even in sightings, there are like tall aliens and short aliens, like the ubiquitous grays. People call them grays. They're the large almond-shaped eyes, very black eyes that seem to have a lot of psychic power, things of this kind. Then there are the taller, in many cases more human-like aliens. There have been through the age of the modern UFO since the 1940s, there have been they've called them Nordics, some of the tall ones, and the grays have been. There's a theory now, modern theory. I'm thinking of several experts who believe that the aliens that are grays, the short ones, are really not, are maybe biomechanical. They may not be fully living organic creatures, right? They may be drones of some kind, the ones who do the probing, the ones who do the abducting and this kind of thing. And sometimes when people are in the middle of the abduction experience, or especially if there are medical experiments supposedly involved, that they will have the taller ones will come. Sometimes the taller ones are seen in the benign situations. They will sit down, or not sit down, but they will talk with the abductee and talk about philosophy, or saying, don't worry. Very often in the Andreasen case, a famous case that were abductions of an entire family, there would be this sort of thing going on. So I really don't know. Nothing in the paranormal is what it appears to be. These could be parasite experiences, and as I mentioned earlier, experts such as Kathleen Martin are reporting to me that you've got more and more negative phenomena taking place around these things than you have the traditional abductions by the tall or short aliens in the mechanical kind of craft and this sort of thing. So the nature of the phenomenon may be changing, or just the people are reporting different things. So, yeah, I think that's probably what I know about it.
Tracy wants to know, have you ever met or run into an elemental?
Oh, that's an interesting question. An elemental, in the ancient sense of the term, was a spirit that was believed to be a spirit based on the four ancient elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Okay, earth spirits, water spirits, fire spirits, and air spirits. That's the traditional interpretation. I have made it a point to kind of study entities that may be associated with water, and I'm thinking of just a beautiful series of experiences I had in England some years ago. And I have a lot of family there, so I go now and then. In the traditional, what are traditionally known as holy wells. Now, it's fascinating because the strength of the pagan religions, pretty much all over Europe anyway, and pretty much all over the world, became pretty much part of Christianity. And the early Christians, or at least the people who brought the Christian faith to Europe, often did so not always peacefully, but they made it a point to adopt or baptize, as they would say, certain pagan practices that they felt could be incorporated into Christian belief. And one of these things was they took pagan sites that had what were believed to be, say, water spirits, wells, and they made them holy wells, and they would associate them with a saint, whether that saint existed or not. If our multiverse thing holds up, the saint exists somewhere or somewhere, right? So I have had several beautiful experiences at places like this. Most of which are in the middle of nowhere. Some are in churches. They have whole churches built around the well that were pagan sites before. And I'm thinking of one in North Devon, in the southwest of England, the West Country, that was in the middle of a farmer's field. I suppose I should have been concerned about getting shot, but it was so far out of there. I parked the car up on top of the hill, walked down, because I had a special map where it was. And just a beautiful, beautiful experience. There were sheep gazing around. By the end of that trip, if I never saw another sheep, it'd be too soon, but they were sort of grazing around this lovely place. I drank from the well. I had the most beautiful, warm experience. There was something there. I think a very, again, the whole notion of spirit is difficult, but I think a parallel world experience of perhaps a very good world. What to us would be a very good world. That's perhaps arbitrary, but it was a wonderful experience, and I felt touched by that wonderful entity. And I can see why people would believe in that sort of thing. So that would be an elemental kind of spirit or being or whatever. The earth ones, certain places, certainly. If you feel, to this day, I don't go into the woods without touching the ground and asking permission with respect and love to enter.
No way.
Oh yeah, no, that may sound silly to some, but that's what I do. And there are some places where you just don't feel at peace or don't feel welcome, but very, very few in my experience. Other people, maybe it's what you bring with you. As I said, you would participate in these things. And I have had some beautiful experiences in that regard. Where I live is on a very strange hill, Woonsocket Hill in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, strangely enough. And the hill is I believe, the center of a cave, where there's a cave, right? It's within easy walking distance of my house. And if you look at some books of New England folklore, you will read about the Devil's Hole. Okay, and supposedly wolf-like spirits come out of this thing, and we've had a lot of not negative experiences, but strange experiences. There was a place in the corner of our property where I had a bench, and I would go out there and sit and smoke a pipe. Don't tell my wife I told you that. And out across the road was some woods, and there was the strangest sounds coming from these woods. And we had a neighbor who heard it as well, and she and I both got the feeling, don't pay too much attention to that. Might have been an intersect point at one place. The hill itself is a giant ground plane antenna, so to speak. It's got a lot of high water table, clay soils. Our house is under, I feel, a great deal of protection. But look at some of the stuff we're into, some of the stuff we tangle with. My older son took a picture in the sky over our house, attempting to get, it was a very clear night, attempting to get some of the stars. Instead, he got a hooded figure that seemed to be huge, looming over the place. However, we have always felt very, very protected. We have a very happy home, a goofy but happy family, and both our sons still live at home. And I've actually seen on several occasions what I consider guardians. There was a huge bear-like back of a creature walking by the windows of our sunroom, which are about 8 feet high off the ground. And I got the most protected, warm feeling from this. I feel we are protected. Nothing negative happens in there. We have our strange glitches, as anyone else would. There was, at one point, a cat came in, and this is all earth spirit related, I would think, or if it is a spirit. There would be kind of a spirit of place. There are multiversal things that happen. There was a cat who lived next door, who was just a lovely guy, but he felt that he belonged to us. He was always trying to run into it. Did you ever see the movie? Was it the Christmas Story with the Bumpus's dogs always trying to run past Darren McGann? Well, I had the Bumpus's cats, okay? And they were always trying to get into our house, and I let him in. And this one big orange boy, I put him out at one point because I was trying to do my treadmill out there in our sunroom, and I put him out and I locked the door. Well, I turned to walk toward the other end of the room, and I heard a plop, like a cat dropping on the floor, and there he was back in. And these are kinds of things. Ben has had a number of experiences in the company of some of his friends in the woods there, large Bigfoot-like creatures, and as a matter of fact, before he became a radio star, I said, you're going to get his mother and I said, you're going to get a real job and work at that before you do something else, so you could realize what it's like. So he worked in the kitchen of this nursing home up on top of our hill, and he would walk up to through the woods to go to work. Well, he stopped walking through the woods because he'd had all these experiences coming home, especially after dark. So this might be a lengthy answer to the short question of the earth elemental kind of thing. Air was often associated with spirits of the air, was often associated with demonic entities or parasites. Even Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew refers to spirits of the air, certain kinds of demonic entities that might have been perceived at the time. So if you're talking about parasites, what haven't I covered? Fire. Fire is a little tricky to talk about because fire can be so destructive, and naturally people might think it's demonic and everything else. So I haven't had a lot of experience with that, but candles are used to purify at certain times. Sometimes the Warrens believed that the candle in the room would feed the energy of a negative entity. Sometimes it would, just as they believed it would draw the warmth out of a room or out of you, it would draw it out of a candle too. So maybe that would be related to the fire element. So that's about all I can say on the elements.
All right. Zazara, please ask why I feel responsible for the things that happen in my dreams when they come true.
Okay, that's interesting. There are some dreams, and this gets back to what we've talked about dreams being reflections or experiences of parallel lives. And this person feels responsible for events that happen in the dreams that I take are negative, especially when they come true. So really what the person is asking, I think, is he or she, I can't remember.
Zara.
Zara, okay. So is she believing that she is making the things come true in our world? I'm sure inadvertently. Yeah. So I'm assuming these may be negative things. Okay, maybe not. I think that that is not necessarily. Although I don't know. she shouldn't feel responsible for it, because unless there is intent, conscious intent, obviously, even in theology or in law, you're not considered responsible, at least for a deliberate act. So I mean, even in a court of law, she would not be held responsible. However, I've thought a lot about that lately. The interaction of our conscious with our subconscious, and of one life with another. I'll give an example. I was in the U.S. Coast Guard, and I was on assignment in Boston at one point, and I was standing, and I had this awful experience. If you've ever tried to commute in and out of a major city, particularly Boston or New York, I mean, it's like, a prison sentence. I only had to do it for a week, but it was horrible. So I'm standing on the railroad platform of the station in Boston, South Station, and I felt a malign presence. And I was in uniform, of course, and there was a man walking toward me on the platform, did not have his eyes on me, but I felt a terrible threat from this man.
Oh.
And he walked behind me, and I felt something go into my back, and I kind of arched forward. Fortunately, I wasn't very close to the track, but he kept walking. He hadn't actually done anything to me physically. But I don't know, maybe in a parallel life, the Coast Guard didn't save his boat, or I don't know. But I felt that maybe in some, certainly in a close parallel reality, he had stabbed me or something, okay? And I was unhurt, of course, but I think that one life can impinge on another in that way, that you can have the feelings. Maybe the pain in your side might be because something happened to you in a close parallel reality. And I think that's a real thing, because these worlds are not divorced from one another. They're not entirely separate. Energy and inhabitants can be interchanged. It's one big us. It's one big reality. And I think that in the sense of dreaming, if she's dreaming of parallel realities, she may be having a deja vu experience. It may be her experience of when it's happening. But I think it's simply an awareness rather than a causation. I think there's no reason to feel guilty. She's simply experiencing it. I think we can cause things in other worlds, but I think if there is no intent, I don't think she has anything to worry about from that score. I think it's just an awareness. And the awareness sometimes can be a blessing, or it can be a curse.
I've experienced where I'll want something, and it may not happen right away, but I'll think about it, and I'll say, someday I want that big house on the corner with a circular driveway. And I thought about it, and all the time I used to think about it, and it happened. Then I thought
that happens to me too. Yeah.
And it not only happens to me, but my daughter and my sister too. So it's like wishful thinking, and you make it happen.
Well, you envision next week's lottery number. Let me know.
Oh.
But I think that's entirely possible. I think that we, the more aware we are, and I think a lot of people who do paranormal research are very aware in the multiversal sense, even though they might not know it. And we do. What did I talk about the shaman doing? Explaining to me what they do in Australia. They go into the other worlds, and they make real. They pull out of there and make real in our world what their client wants, or what needs to be done, or the healing, or the whatever, the home. I think that and the New Age concept of visualization, that if you visualize it enough, that it can happen. I think that's a real phenomenon. I think we have to be careful of it, like be careful what you wish for, because there could be unintended consequences, unintended consequences. We make real in our conscious reality, which is really quite narrow. What we need. I think I say let your subconscious do the work. Study, be aware, be positive. That's everything. Don't be negative, be positive. And I think what your subconscious brings to your life is what you will need, and things that are good. And so I think that's a very real phenomenon. I think we do make present in our lives what we have present in good places and times elsewhere and elsewhere.
All right, I'm just two more questions, guys. Poor Paul. You didn't know what you're getting yourself into tonight.
I don't know about my poor hostess.
Okay, Super Witchy. She wants to know: is there true destiny, or is it just free will?
Oh, well, that's almost a theological question. So, is it destiny as opposed to free will? Okay. Well, why does there have to be this is my problem with Western theological and philosophical thinking. Why does there have to be a dichotomy? Why does there have to be a problem between religion and science? You know, I think that we free will is, I think, mostly an expression that indicates what we want here and now, not being aware of other lives, or at least very many other lives that aren't like this one, where we may have wisdom or whatever, more knowledge, etc. I think that free will, I don't know if either term is good enough to really have much meaning. I think that there has to be that unity. There has to be that unity between what we want, okay, and what is good for us, and our subconscious kind of knows what's good for us. What I'm really saying is that they're just two halves of this. They're just two sides of the same coin. Free will is an expression, and so is destiny. But I think that, as I've said over and over again here, we make our own bed in the multiverse. Our own intent, our own awareness will bring forth what something we may think is destiny, but really was kind of created by us, or something we think is free will, but really was created by our subconscious. You know, and is that free will? It may be, maybe not. I don't think the terms really have any meaning.
All right, one last question. Oh, Phil wants to know, what do you think? I have one other question. Okay, that portal. Okay, that portal that somebody may walk into and disappear. Okay. This is a multiple. Okay, so I'm thinking about that. Okay, so this portal's here and somebody walks through it and they disappear. Can somebody 2 minutes later or 5 minutes later walk through that same area where the portal is, and will the same thing happen to that person, or once that person goes into that portal, it goes away?
In my experience and from my studies, I have not known that particular scenario to occur. I'm thinking of a case which is really well documented, and this gets into where someone might go if they walk through a portal or intersect point. I suppose it's possible. I don't see any reason why not. But sometimes these intersect points are changing locations all the time. But we got into this before. Other times not. I've never known, and this doesn't mean it's not possible, an intersect point or portal, whatever you want to call it, to be in one place of that magnitude, of that power, to be in one place for any great length of time, where you could simply walk in and somebody else walk in behind you. That being said, there is a place in. I'm trying to. And I'm having a senior moment here, also because it's almost midnight.
God,
South America,
sorry.
Central America. I'll live. Don't worry about it. Central America, South America. I believe it might have been the Incas, who actually built carved a stone shrine. I hate to speculate on the air because I'm not sure, but they did build one of the indigenous peoples a huge, beautiful carved portal with a small door in it, and they believed that they could come in and out of that door to and from what amounts to a parallel world, land of the gods, or this sort of thing. So yeah, it is certainly theoretically possible, and the indigenous peoples were not stupid by any means. Far from it. We're the ones who kind of lost all this knowledge, and they believed that you could do that kind of thing. So I have no reason. I've never personally run into it. I have run into people disappearing and appearing somewhere else simultaneously. That's been well documented. So, but in my own personal experience, I haven't run into the multiple disappearance thing, one after the other like that.
David Pilates has written books on people disappearing.
Yeah.
And the majority of the disappearances are in national forests, national parks. And
those disappear. Yes.
Okay, so what happened? Where are these people going?
Well, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the disappearances. Of course, these are huge wilderness areas that are protected from development. So naturally, it's going to be more isolated than other places. Over 100,000 people every year. That's an old statistic. It might be more now, with a huge population we have. Disappear each year without a trace. Now, obviously, some of those are intentional, or terrible crimes that haven't been discovered, but many are just, there's no evidence of criminality or no reason for the person to disappear intentionally. Among these are the national park disappearances all over the world, not just in American national parks, Canadian, European, large wilderness areas. The question is, as you say, where do they go? I'm thinking that brings to mind a rather disconcerting possibility in at least one or two cases. There are fossils in the Paluxy riverbed of Texas, which I've seen, that I have no reason to believe are fake because they've been long known, of dinosaur tracks that are walking alongside, or at least crossing the same path as human tracks, which of course by any measure of history or paleontology or archaeology or anthropology even, is impossible. So one wonders. There's even one from, I believe it was discovered in South Dakota or Utah, of a human foot that had a shoe on that is crushing, apparently, a trilobite. We're talking 500 million years ago. Trilobites, distant ancestors of the horseshoe crab that lived under the seas. And in that area, that area was wet at the time, if not a sea. And so the question arises, is it possible that these were displaced humans from some very unfortunately encountered parallel reality, walking through a portal and ending up in these far-flung what to us would be far-flung parallel worlds where it was a distant time. Now, I feel sorry for anybody in that case, not necessarily because of dinosaurs, but that too, but because the atmosphere at the time would have had elements that were toxic to us, let alone microbes to which we have no immunity, something that science fiction filmmakers don't think about when they send people to other planets. So these are all possibilities. There were people appearing in the airport. I'm thinking of two cases in Tokyo. People appeared in the airport wearing clothes that were very strange, with passports from countries that didn't exist. In one case, not being able to speak Japanese or anything else anybody understood, and this sort of thing. So where or when people go could be, these places could be anywhere, anywhen.
All right. Well, one of the story, because we did a show about 2 months ago on this, and the most clusters of disappearances are right here in Yosemite. And the father, one instance at Yosemite, the father and the daughter, and I think somebody else, they went horseback riding, and they went on an excursion in Yosemite, and they came across these tents that were in the valley, and so they got off their horse, and the people greeted them, and with refreshments, and they were just freshening up to continue on their little trek. And the daughters told the father, there was a man sitting maybe, 50 yards in front of them. And she said, Dad, see that man over there? I'm going to go talk to him and take some pictures. And she brought her camera with her. And she went over there and she was talking with the man. And she took the cap off of her camera. And she was taking pictures. And she told that man, she said, I'm going to go down to the riverbed. And the riverbed it was maybe 25 feet, but it wasn't down in a ravine or anything. She said, I'm just going to go over here to the riverbed and take some pictures over there. And I don't know if he was paying any attention to her, but she went over there and she was, I guess, taking pictures, and she disappeared. And the only thing they found, the man was still there, but she disappeared, and the only thing they found was her, the cap to her camera.
Okay.
And there's no trees. Mm-hmm. This was all in broad daylight. I don't think the man he was sitting there, but he never saw what happened.
Well, I'm thinking too of my own son's experience. I go back to that experience in the car. In the particular rural family in which he was having the accident, did passersby see the car disappear as he was having the experience of suddenly not being in the accident and suddenly just driving normally. Because there have to be two sides to the equation, you'd think. This girl may have just, maybe to her, everybody else disappeared, and she didn't notice any difference. There have been people who have been through these experiences who have survived it. I'm thinking of one, at one point, there was a driver, I believe it was in New York State, and he and his family were just going on vacation, driving south. They drove into a fog. They came out in Virginia like seconds later, and there was no paint left on the car.
Oh, my God.
And that was, they were none the worse for wear. Nothing was really all that different, although there might have been things different in France, say, or Europe that he didn't know about. So parallel world experience, but nothing particularly in their sphere. So these are all possibilities. I mean, you go in one way, you have to come out somewhere else, or somewhere, and that's pretty much it. So hopefully it's not too bad a world in which you come out. And I'm thinking too that there's a very well attested case of a Spanish soldier. I can't remember the precise year, but it was in the 1600s, early 1600s, and he was on guard at the government facilities in Mexico City. Okay, the Spanish were all over the southern part of the hemisphere at the time, Asia, the Philippines and all. And all of a sudden, he disappeared in the sight of several people. And you're halfway across the world in Manila, he reappears at the court, not the court, but at the government facilities and buildings in Manila. And people suddenly, he was kind of disoriented. People suddenly noticed, other soldiers noticed that his uniform was different, because in each colony they'd have different uniforms to identify them. And so what the hey, are you doing here? And they brought him all the way to the governor. And he insisted that he had been in Mexico City that morning on guard doing his normal duties. And they said, yeah, right. And they threw him in jail. There was a nutcase. Well, a ship arrived, I think it was several weeks later, and the poor guy's languishing in jail. They didn't know what to do with him. And somebody reported what had happened in Mexico City, and there was so it was documented by witnesses, and there he was. And so they let him out. He had a couple of conferences with the bishop, and I don't know what the content of that was, and they sent him back to Mexico City, where we're right back on guard. So he had kind of an inadvertent vacation in the Philippines. Oh. That's pretty well attested.
Wow, crazy!
Absolutely.
Yeah, those disappearances really fascinate me.
That's our world. That's our multiverse.
Oh my God! Well, Paul, you poor thing, I've had you on for 3 hours.
yeah, you're worse than George Nuri.
But oh my God, you're so knowledgeable. We love you. We love you. Everybody loves you. They just are so fascinated with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. You're very kind. As Mark Twain said, I could live 6 months on one good compliment.
Oh, you're a walking encyclopedia. I've told you that before. I just love having you on the show, and I'm sorry I kept you for so long. But you're so fascinating, Paul. And thank you again. I want to thank you so much. Let's see. Okay, again, everybody, Paul has 2 websites. He has New England Ghosts. It is New England. Oh God! See, I'm not looking at your website. What is it? NewEnglandGhosts.com.
NewEnglandGhosts.com.
And then a fabulous, one of the best radio shows, Behind the Paranormal, and that is BehindTheParanormal.com. And everybody, and he has has 9 books, and
not yet. 7 in print.
Oh, 7 books. Okay.
No, 5 in print, but 7 altogether. Yeah.
And where can they get your books, Paul?
Well, they can order them from BehindTheParanormal.com. That'll help us keep the 650 hours of recorded shows free. Also, the usual suspects: Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, etc.
Oh my gosh, Paul!
And the new one comes out in the fall. Will be out in all the stores.
Oh well, will you come on my show with that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Late this year.
Don't forget me. All right, Paul.
I will never forget.
Paul, it was a pleasure, and thank you again for coming on the show. It was just a real pleasure, as always, to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. It's always good to be on.
Good night, Paul. Thank you.
Good night.
Oh, wow. That was so awesome. Everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight. Let me get rid of this. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. Everybody, thanks so much. It was a long show tonight. Thanks so much, everyone. Kind of went off the subject, but Paul is a genius. He's also a genius. He's highly intelligent. And yeah, we still have 100 people. Oh my God, you poor guys. Thanks so much. Did you want me to do shout outs? There's no way I'm going to be able to edit the show. So I'm all 3 hours. Do you guys want me to do shout outs? Do you want me to do shout outs? Thanks so much for, there's still 100 people here watching. That's crazy. Okay, so Margarita, whoops, you guys got to slow down. Hold on. All right, here we go. All right, Ginger Simmons, oh my God, you're doing it to me. All right, here, let me go back now. Okay, River Culver, Starry Night, Mary Lou, Griffin Corcoran, Junebug 1029. Hi, June, I haven't seen you in a long time. Zoe Small, F Warrior, Margarita Harveth, Soupy Witchy Gamer, Tracy Boyning, Ginger Simmons, April Wilcher, Mary Lou, Debbie Gale, The Unseen Scene, Willful Today, Butter Kisses, Butterfly Kisses. We have a kitty upstairs, Butters. Nancy Soap La Vida, Starry Night. Wow, you guys, thanks. Whoops, wait a minute, you guys. Kristen Walker, Carl White, Aaron Kemp, Unique Sweet Annie, Para Princess Patricia, Diane Hilbert, Peach on the Leash, cute. Jimmy Cortez, how you doing, honey? How those tests come out? Hope they all came out great. Bobby Strunk, hold on. Mama Joe Buffalo Woman, Debbie Gale. Oh, I said Debbie Gale. All right. I know I missed somebody. Buffalo Joe Woman, Andrew Cox, Basinger 11, Phil M, Alexandra Violet. Anybody else want shout outs? Oh, and my mod, Chipper Terrier. Don't forget my mod, Royce Hinman. Thank you, Royce, so much for modding. Lily Villalobos, Jen LL, Rebecca. Anybody else? Oh, man, what a night. Cherry K. Montalbano. Oh, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Isn't he brilliant? Tiffany Twisted. Yay. Oh my God, that's right. Elle Miller. I forgot. It's Easter this weekend. Oh my God. What a weekend this is going to be for me. I got to go out tomorrow, start shopping. Janet W. Oh my God, I gotta start shopping. My daughter's having Easter, so we already set the table. Gotta go shopping. Oh, Zazara, you're new to the show. Desert Deity, Phil M. Yeah, welcome to the show. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'd appreciate it. And make sure if you really liked my show that you give me some likes tonight. I'd appreciate that too. And yeah, so it's going to be crazy. I'm so excited about Easter. Oh my God, I can't wait. So everybody, happy Easter, and thank you so much for coming here every week. Now, I had scheduled a show for next Thursday with Mike Ricksecker, and it's on Victorian photography. Oh, hi, Mary Dallas, Greta T. Oh, there you are, Royce. It's on Sandy Miller. It's on Victorian photography, and I'm really going to have to do some study on that one. I had done a show a couple of years ago on that, and I hope you guys won't get upset, because in that Victorian photography, it is included. You know how they used to take pictures. Oh, Christine Phyllis. How they used to take pictures of dead people. Mary Lou, hi Mary Lou. Will that bother you if we do the whole thing on Victorian photography? And it's just not going to be on dead people. It's going to talk about Victorian photography and all the crazy pictures that they used to do, and some history on it. I don't know. Is that something you'd be interested in? Starry Night. Is that a topic you guys will be interested in, Victorian photography? Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. No? Okay. Oh, you guys like that? It won't bother you? Okay. Yeah, yeah. You can handle it. Well, the Victorian era was a fascinating era. Fascinating era. They did, because you see, they had no television or radio, and photography was their thing. All right. So I'll okay, as long as, well, you can watch or not watch. It's going to be, all my shows are going to be a hit and miss. Sometimes you're going to like them and sometimes you're not. And then also don't forget Monday night, episode 3 of the Horsefly Chronicles Paranormal Phenomena Experiment with Phil Saracusa and Carissa Fleck. She's working on getting a guest for a different guest for the show, and I will put up a prayer for you guys to say. I found a prayer for you guys to say before the show, okay? And I want you to say it, unless you have your own. But I do want you to say a prayer, okay? To protect yourself before that show, all right? Okay, so, oh my gosh, I'm F Warrior, hi. So it's creepy that people looked alike. Yeah, it is. And I'll tell you something, some of those pictures, it's hard to tell which one actually is dead. Now, I know what they used to use to hold up the dead, and some pictures, you can't see it. There's a brace, and some of those pictures are really hard to see. Anyway, so I guess that's what I'll do next week. Like I said, you can either watch or not. It's up to you. But just make sure on Monday nights you do some kind of a protection, and I will post I'll post a prayer in there. Now look, anybody who wants reminders, I can post the prayer in that show reminder. I have 150 people now on that list. So if you want to be on the show reminder, send a request to my website, paranormalzone.tv, and you can I think it's either contact or email, and if you get on that email list, I'll send you a Don Renee, I'll send you a reminder, a show reminder, okay? Hey, and also, hey, you guys, do you know that I have a like page on Facebook? Would you guys give me a like on Facebook? It's Do You Believe? I think it's Do You Believe web series fan page. Would you guys go over there and give me a like? I'd really appreciate it. If Royce is in the there, can you give them the link to that? No, you have to say your own prayer. But if anybody, but I can send a, and it's not It's not really a prayer. It's something that you say to protect you from negative energy. I got that from a Brad Steiger from his website, and I can send that to you. And take it or leave it, okay? Um, um, yeah, if you need a protection for Victorian pictures, I can always put up a warning. So you want a warning, let's see. Okay. Okay, Victorian pictures. Okay. So it might not be suitable for some viewers. Okay. That's fair. That's fair. I will do that. Okay. Thanks, Roy. Thanks, Royce. All right, there's still 87 people. Hey, Royce, can you put the link to my... Let me see if I can put the link up to my... Hold on. See if I can get the link to my Do You Believe web series fan page. I'd really like to build that up. I don't know if this will let me do it. Oh, it did it. Oh, it didn't do it. I did, Janet. I posted a I posted a prayer. It won't let me do it. All right, anyway, it's Do You Believe Do You Believe web series fan page. For those who are friends with me on Facebook, if you would go over there and give my page a like, I'd really appreciate it. Oh gosh. Okay. Got some good shows coming up. My calendar. I don't have my calendar. Let's see. Yeah. All right. Oh, I have another question. Okay. So anyway, everybody have a wonderful Summer Sims. Everybody have a wonderful evening and happy Easter. Have a great holiday, and don't forget Monday night back with Carissa and Phil. And I'll see you on Monday. Okay. Do You Believe web series? Yeah, Marlu. Do You Believe web series fan page? Okay, I'd appreciate it. Yes, Paul is. Oh my God, he's awesome. Sometimes it's over my head the way he talks because I don't understand all of that, but he's absolutely awesome. Let's see. Oh, Joanne, we're friends. We're friends. Joanne Mitchell on Facebook. Oh, hi, Miss Paula. Okay, good night, everybody. Good night. Okay, I'll see you on Monday. Okay. Happy Easter. Be safe. Have a good time. Love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you. Love you.